Story 1. I'm a 45-year-old man. I'm married to Maria. She's 43. We've been married for 15 years and we live in Austin, Texas. We have 3 children, aged 12, 10, and 7, all boys. We're very happy and we live a quiet life. I work full-time and my wife's a stay-at-home mom to our children. We've had a relatively easy marriage and we've never had huge fights or disagreements. But there's one thing that we often disagree with, and that is my wife's mother. My mother-in-law, Carol. She's 65 and is the one thing that often causes discord in my marriage. She's a rude, crass woman who hates me and resents me for ever marrying her daughter. Maria and I are childhood sweethearts and we've been together since we were 15 years old. And Carol has hated me since the day she met me. I'm not sure what it is about me that she took a real disliking to, but she's hated me ever since the day my wife brought me home to meet her folks. Originally, she wasn't quite as pushy as she is now. But 10 years ago, my father-in-law passed away, and Carol has pretty much latched onto my wife as her only companion. She has other children, but my wife is the softest of them all. And it's my theory that Carol knows that my wife is at least likely to call her out on her bullcrap. Of course, we've had our fair share of issues those first few years of marriage, and even before that, but since the death of her husband, she seems to view me as a competition for her daughter's attention. This is ridiculous, of course. I've never tried to come between them, and I myself am very close with my own mother. So I know the importance of keeping that relationship solid. It doesn't just stop at me, though. Carol has even developed a distaste to our children. When my oldest was born, he looked a lot like his mother, and Carol adored him. She was the perfect grandmother. She would make snide remarks, though, that he probably isn't mine, and that it was a good thing that he did not inherit my looks. I never took her seriously, of course, but it was obvious that she was trying to cause problems between my wife and I. Unfortunately for her, he grew up to look a lot like me. This was when she stopped all little dates and taken him to the park, stuff like that. After each of our children were born, they looked so much like their mother, but as they've grown up, all our children now take to my side. And Carol hates this. She treats them like they aren't there. To her other grandchildren, she's amazing little grandma. She spoils them, takes them out for lunch, always buys them expensive birthday stuff and presents. Normal grandparent treatment. But she point-blank refuses to bond with our boys, and any more than necessary. She refuses to show up at school functions, and has pretended multiple times to forget birthdays. When I make it a point to remind her in hopes of preventing this, it breaks my heart when my youngest asks me why his grandmother doesn't like him, though the other 2 have come to terms with the fact. Even my oldest has questioned why she doesn't spend time with him as much as she used to. It shows a marked and deliberate effort that even though my wife is her favorite child and she spends so much time at her house, she remains cold with the boys who she's practically watched grow up. As if this wasn't all enough, she also has accused me of cheating on my wife multiple times. At first, it was just snippy little remarks about the hours I worked and questioning me on when I spent so much time at the bar with my drinking buddies. But it's escalated in recent years. At one point, she saw me having lunch with a friend from work and took a picture of us to show my wife. My wife was devastated and believed her mother. It took me months to convince her that I wasn't cheating on her, and even then it took her meeting the woman and speaking to her to realize that we weren't doing anything nefarious. It was only after that my wife gave her mother a sharp talking to, and an ultimatum that my mother-in-law stopped actively trying to interfere in our marriage, or she'll stop contact. Even then, she only stopped outwardly showing hostility when my wife was in the room. She still glares at me every chance she gets. The way she treats me isn't an issue. I'm used to it now. I have to be after 30 years of putting up with it. It's the way she attacks my children that upsets me. My wife's family are all very petite, slender people, whereas my own are tall and round. We tend to carry more weight on us than other people, and my sons have all followed suit. Carol has taken a scalding to my sons when they eat more than a rabbit's portion of food and make little comments about their weight. My 12-year-old is of the age where he's becoming to feel self-conscious, so this is absolutely the worst possible thing you could say. He's been starting to struggle with acne, and instead of being supportive, Carol just blames it for the eating processed foods and all his refined sugar sweets. The comments have just gotten worse and worse over the years, and they're now at an all-time high. She rarely says a word to me or my children unless it's to insult us. The issue is that, when my wife is around, my mother-in-law isn't half as cruel as she is when she leaves the room. Sure, she's cold to us, but as soon as my wife goes to the bathroom or has to answer the phone, the room drops about 10 degrees and the claws come out to play. I've told my wife this, obviously, and it's not like she thinks I'm lying, but I don't think intellectually she actually comprehends the way her mother behaves. I've tried explaining it to her and using her mother's words verbatim, but she always just brushes past it. I know that she doesn't think I'm lying, like I said, but she just doesn't understand how much of an issue it is. Our oldest came to me in tears the other day because his jeans were too small and he was worried that he'd become fatter. I had to reassure him that it's normal for a boy his age to grow out of clothing quickly, but it broke my heart. It really did. A child that age should not be worrying about things like that. The kids are picking up on the way their grandmother behaves and taking it to hear, which is unacceptable. Our middle boy has asked me why he doesn't look like his mother, and our youngest has even asked if he had a different mom, because he doesn't look much like my wife. I had to show him pictures of the day he was born to prove that we'd have him his entire life. I've tried talking to my wife about these things, but she just laughs it off and puts it down to kids being kids. But there's just no way kids wonder about their parentage unless someone's whispering it in their ear, sowing the seeds of doubt. And that's what I think she doesn't understand. At my wife's insistence, I haven't blown up on her mother. She's aware of the problem to some degree and is trying to deal with it in her own way. Personally, I think someone needs to yell at my mother-in-law and tell her exactly what she is and how she's impacting our entire family. But I won't go against my wife. I've given her an ultimatum. However, if the comments continue, I will ban her mother from our house. It's not for my sake, but for our children's. She can say whatever nonsense she wants to me, but I won't allow her to poison our kids against themselves. She's already caused a complex in our oldest, who's begun to skip meals. My wife promises that she'll take care of it, and I trust her to do so. Though the fact she hasn't in the past 15 years of our marriage does bother me. I've tried not to let it get to me, but it really does sting. I feel like we owe it to each other to stand up for each other no matter what, and that's just a part of marriage. Due to all these circumstances, I've requested that we as a family spend Christmas with my family this year. Usually, we all go to my mother-in-law's, along with all my wife's brothers and sisters and their families. My mother-in-law will cook a big feast, and we'll all spend the night in her home. Unfortunately, the occasion's a lot less fun for my kids and me, as it's for others somehow. We always end up sleeping on the floor in our sleeping bags, rather than one of the guest rooms like all the other in-laws. We're supposed to take turns as there are only 4 guest bedrooms, but somehow, some way, my family and I are always the ones who end up slumming it. Every year, I tell my wife that we won't be staying the night. And every year, we end up sleeping on the living room floor. I'm not quite as young as I used to be, and the strain has started to mess with my back. Last year, I didn't fully recover until Valentine's Day, and even had to take the first week of the new year off. For those reasons, I've decided that this year, we'll have a dinner at my mom and dad's house and come back home late. My wife's okay with this plan because she's finally starting to get tired of her own mom's antics. She used to make excuses for her mother and laugh things off, but I think hearing our youngest wonder why his grandma doesn't like him has hit her just as hard as it hit me. I'm glad that she's on board, though. I was prepared to fight for her, well, if she did not agree. I'm not usually one to disagree and argue with my wife, and I have a bit of a reputation for being henpecked. But this was one thing that I was willing to stand on firm. My mother, of course, is thrilled. It's usually just her and my dad for Christmas, so she's so excited to make a big deal out of it. She loves our kids, but we usually don't get to see her very often ever since we moved to be closer to my mother-in-law when her husband passed away. The kids are really excited too. They love my mom. It breaks my heart that they really only have one grandmother who actually enjoys their company. But honestly, my mom loves them enough for 3 grandmothers. They've already started talking excitedly amongst themselves about the toys that they're planning to bring. On top of that, my mother-in-law's not the best cook, so I myself am excited for the food that my mother will make because she's very good. Obviously, my mother-in-law has not taken well to the news. Thank gosh I wasn't the one who had to tell her, but I pity my wife for having to have that conversation. From what I've heard, there were tons of crocodile tears. It was only after the news that my mother-in-law decided to tell my wife all about her ailing health. Apparently, her heart isn't what it used to be, and she fears that this may be the year that she gets to spend the holidays with all her family. Neither of us believe her when she says that this Christmas might be her last. Though, she's used her health to manipulate us before. But thankfully, now we're wise to her tricks. A few years ago, she needed to have a minor surgery on her hip, and my wife spent 3 months sleeping on her couch, answering her mother's every beck and call, basically acting as a live-in nurse. The boys and I were miserable, and it was only when I physically went and fetched my wife back home that her mother made this miraculous recovery and no longer needed any help. After the news that we won't be attending her annual get-together, my mother-in-law has decided to just completely cancel the entire thing. She sent messages to everyone who usually attends, bemoaning our heartlessness. Multiple people have contacted us both together and separately and told us that we should be ashamed of ourselves for leaving a helpless old lady out in the cold. My wife's taking it harder than me. I'm used to her family hating me and being angry with every decision I make. It's been my reality for 30 years now. She, however, feels terrible about the whole thing. Her sisters are just as manipulative as her mother, and they're laying it on thick. Every time my wife speaks to them, I've had to tell her that I don't care what her sister says, that we're spending the holidays with my family. I feel bad for her, though. I think she's stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment, but I'm going to stay firm on this one. Even if I don't make it all about the children, I myself deserve a nice Christmas for once. One without all the side-eyeing from my wife's cousins, who've heard terrible things about me, when I've never had a conversation with them in my life. As far as I was concerned, the whole affair was put to bed. My mother-in-law could throw her tantrums all she wanted, but the plans were made. My mom was so excited. She usually doesn't make a big deal out of holidays ever. There's really no point to it when it's just her and my dad all alone. I don't think that she's made a real Christmas meal since I moved away from college. She's been sending me recipes she finds in magazines, asking my wife her favorite desserts, and asking me about any allergies the boys may have, as if she wouldn't already know if one of them could have a peanut allergy or something. It's really nice to see her get this way, especially when we haven't even been able to visit her in a while. It takes about an hour drive down there, which isn't a lot, but with my work and all the kids' extracurriculars, we don't get too often. So the plan was made, and we were all excited. The kids were looking forward to seeing my mother, and I was looking forward to a holiday with people who actually care for me. And my wife was looking forward to not have to run interference between me and her mom all night. We arrived at my parents' house around 11 a.m. Christmas morning. The kids have all brought their favorite toys, and we're looking forward to a nice day. But when we got to the driveway, there was a familiar car there. It was none other than my mother-in-law. I didn't believe my eyes. At first, I thought I must be seeing things or dreaming or nightmare, but no, it was her. When we got inside, my poor mom and dad were sitting awkwardly trying to be good hosts, while she looked around and insulted my mom's interior design choices. I asked her what she was doing here, and she just smiled and said that she's hoped to surprise us. I had to take my mom aside, apologize, and say she'd been so excited for this day, but of course had to be polite to tell the mother-in-law that she needs to leave. She says it's fine, but my mom's never been one to make a fuss, and I know that it really did bother her. I sent the kids into the living room to play and called my wife outside to talk. I told her she needs to make her mom leave. I was furious at this point, but I was trying to keep it cool. Obviously, it wasn't her fault, but when she refused to make her mother leave, I lost my cool a little bit. I've had enough. And I told her that she has been choosing her mother over her family for long enough. I said that the way her mother treated her kids was disgusting, and it was her job as a mom to protect the child, not allowing someone to be so cruel to our kids. She starts crying at this point, and I felt bad. I felt like I was the bad guy all of a sudden. Even though I've just told the truth, my wife told me that she was scared of telling her mom to leave, because she'd just make a giant scene. I knew that I couldn't be the one to tell her to go. She already hated me enough. I calmed down enough to give my wife a hug and told her that I'd take care of it. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I knew that I had to do it. Once we got back inside, the situation had gone from bad to worse. My mother was shaking with anger, and Dad was darn near holding her back. My mother-in-law was on a tirade about how much sugar and butter my mother must have put into her cookies, and was telling all three of my kids that they could not afford to eat them with their bodies. This really was the final straw, and I knew that drastic actions had to be taken. My wife distracted her mom by drawing her into a conversation, and I ushered my parents into the kitchen until my mom managed to calm herself down. I'm not ashamed of what I did next. I have to say, I'm 100% not proud of it either, but I don't regret it one bit. I called into the living room and asked my wife and mother-in-law if either of them would like a drink. As I'd expected, my mother-in-law asked for a cup of coffee. For some background, my mother-in-law is terribly lactose intolerant. She always has been, and when I say terribly, I mean almost just a whiff of the stuff will send her stomach into fits. She insists that we keep her dairy-free milk separate from our cow's milk in our house, so we had to buy a mini fridge to keep in the garage just to make her happy. Obviously, my mom doesn't know this. She's never spent much time with my mother-in-law, obviously, and even if she did know, she would not have bought any dairy-free milk for Christmas, because no one expected my mother-in-law to show up, so I put cow's milk in her coffee. I knew exactly what I was doing. There's honestly no excuse. I did not go temporarily insane, and I had full control of my faculties. I walked into the room and I handed her the cup of coffee, knowing exactly what was going to happen if she drank it. She was in the bathroom for the entire day. She spent hours in there, and every time she finally recovered, I'd offer to make her more coffee. I think she had 3 cups without realizing what I've done. We had a lovely Christmas while she was out of action. My wife even managed to have fun. She put her mom out of her head and just enjoyed the holiday. We had dinner early, and we played games in the living room for a few hours afterwards. I don't think I've ever had such a great holiday since we've been married. It was wonderful to see the kids so happy. When our oldest did not want to finish his food, my mom acted against and told him that he was wasting away and that a growing boy needs food. It took him a minute, but he started smiling and managed to pack away his dessert like a champion. This was exactly what I've been hoping for in a Christmas. My kids were happy, all enjoying themselves stuffed with food, playing with their new toys. I was relaxed, and even my wife was able to settle down. Normally, she spends so much time mediating between her mother and the rest of us. She ends up stressed to the nines. It was especially wonderful to see my children happy and content, spoiled by their grandparents, rather than wondering why their cousin got gaming consoles, and they got new underwear. Even after the hiccup of my mother-in-law showing up uninvited, we managed to have a wonderful day. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. Her presence in the house was still oppressive, and both my mother and my wife spent more time than was necessary hanging around outside the bathroom door, commiserating her situation while she yelled at them, but all in all, it was a very good day. I'm not sure how I should feel, though. It's New Year's Eve, and now I would have thought that I'd forgot about the entire thing, but it's still just all on my mind. I don't exactly regret what I did. It's more that I know that if my wife found out, she'd be furious. I don't like keeping things from her. We've always been very open with each other about everything, but this isn't something I could just tell her. She would blow up. It would end in a big argument where she would be angry with me, and I would end up letting all my grievances out. Honestly, I think I resent her slightly for allowing her mother to treat me and the children so badly for so many years. I would never allow anyone to speak ill of my wife or our children to me, and it hurts that she doesn't show me the same loyalty that I would show her, and do show her. I fear that if we end up getting into an argument, I would end up saying something that I regret and hurting her feelings. On the other hand, I'm considering sitting her down for a real conversation, anyways, in the hopes to create an open dialogue and get to the bottom of this. For 30 years, her mother has come between us. I didn't mind at first. I'd heard many stories about teenage boys, and I felt that it was perfectly understandable for her family to put me through to my paces. But I have more than proven myself, and I'm not being treated any better than any day I first met them. If anything, the hate has become more pronounced, and they've settled comfortably into their ways. I know that many of my friends have problems with their in-laws, but every single one of them surprised when I reveal the extent of my issues. On top of this, while they themselves have personal problems, I guess you would say, the issues never bleed over to the children. I think that while I wouldn't be happy, I could forgive my wife for her inactivity when her mom is rude to me, but I don't think there's any excuse for allowing her to hurt the children the way she does, especially when she insults their appearance every time she sees them. I have a lot to think about. Honestly, I'm trying to figure out whether I should feel guilty or not for practically poisoning my mother-in-law. I'm leaning towards no, but I'm writing this post to get an outside perspective. Well, thanks in advance for the advice I hope to receive. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. This story was absolutely insane. I don't know if I'm on OP's side because he basically poisoned her, but at the same time, this mother-in-law is crazy. Guys, there's still 2 updates left, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's about to get wild. If you're enjoying today's story so far and you're new to the channel, hello and welcome. My name's Mr. Reddito. I read stories every single day about some of the most dramatic stories I can find on the World Wide Web. If that sounds like something you're into, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and don't forget to click the bell notification as well. And let's see what's happening with update number 1. Hey guys, I'm absolutely astounded by all the love of the post that's gotten. I really appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to write me such kind messages. I'll address some things that I must not have made clear in the original post. First things first, my mother-in-law's absolutely fine. Once she had recovered enough to leave my parents' guest bathroom for more than 10 minutes, I offered to drive her home and come pick her up in the car the next morning. She refused. I don't think she wanted to spend an hour alone with me in the car, so she called my brother-in-law to come pick her up, and my wife followed behind them in her car while I brought the boys home. She hasn't had any lasting health problems, though she was quite drained for a few days after Christmas. My sister-in-law is a nurse, however, and made sure she got plenty of fluids and electrolytes. She's 100% fine, guys. She's been over for dinner a few times since, and she's back to her old, same lovely self. Secondly, I just wanted to defend my wife for a minute. While I agree that she should have stood up to her mother a long time ago, for both mine and the children's sake, she's a wonderful mother. It's not like she's been silent every time my mother-in-law makes a rude comment. She just doesn't keep up the momentum when she does scold her. My wife has a very complicated relationship with her family, and it'll be impossible for me to give you all the complete backstory on a post like this. On top of that, it isn't my story to tell. A lot of you were telling me that I should consider divorce for the children's sake, and the answer to that is a flat-out no. I've no intention to leave my wife, and it isn't even up for discussion. Alright, so yeah, that was just a quick update, and I want to say thank you all for the support. I really appreciate it. Update number 2, final update of the story. Hey everybody, I did not think I'd be writing another update for this post. As far as I was concerned, everything was done and dusted, but I'm afraid I've made a bit of an idiot of myself. My wife's found out what I'd done. Unfortunately, I didn't tell her. I've made the executive decision to keep it from her until the day I die, but fate had other plans. She managed to catch the gist of the situation through reading a notification I had on my phone while I was in the bathroom. She saw a notification from the thread I posted the original story on, and she recognized it. She's absolutely furious. I've promised her that I'll take down all the posts, and I've taken measures to ensure that she doesn't find it again. But there's still the chance that she might find this update, though I hope not. I thought everything had been wrapped up, but she's waited for me to get home from work last week while the kids were in bed and read out sections. She's absolutely against that I would put her mother's health at risk the way I did. Personally, I don't think there was much of a risk at all, but I understand where she's coming from. I tried to be understanding at first, and I did apologize, but she continued to yell, and I've had enough. I said everything that I wanted to say to her about the way her family's treating the boys. Our oldest came down in the middle of our fight and asked what all the yelling's about, but we sent him back to bed and lowered our voices. I've been sleeping on the couch ever since. I don't personally believe that I'm the only one in the wrong, but I'll admit that I shouldn't have given her mother cow milk. She keeps saying that I basically poisoned her own mother, but I think that's being a little bit dramatic, no? She's agreed not to tell her mother what I did, thankfully, and I'm not sure I could come back from that one. And I know that my wife's siblings would have something to say about what I did also. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to come back from this at all, guys, but here's to hoping, isn't it? At least, if any good comes from this entire thing, it's opened up a dialogue with my wife, and will hopefully lead to us being more honest with each other in the future. I'm hoping that the drastic nature of my actions will impress upon her just how important this situation is, and she'll begin to take it more seriously. Again, thank you to everyone who took the time to send me kind messages and well wishes for my children. A few of you have made me laugh during this difficult time, so I want to give you thanks for that. I probably won't be updating this post any further, as I'm not sure exactly what else could happen. Well, here's to the end. Thank you. And yeah, one last thing. If you're my wife reading this right now, I love you, babe. Story 2. I know the title sounds terrible, but hey, hear me out. Please. My fiancé and I have been dating for over a couple years and recently got engaged. He proposed, which I was happy about, and we're both in college. We own a house, cars, and pets together. My parents are well off and gracious. My fiancé and I have a great relationship. I'm talking about no fights, no breakups, good understanding, etc. He's my best friend, my absolute rock, and I don't see myself being with anyone else but him. We moved out together earlier this year, so both of our families should know that our relationship is serious. We both plan on getting married in the future, not right now. People think if we got married, we're having kids right away. But we don't plan on having kids for a long time. So far, we've only broken the news. Well, aside from our immediate family, just a few friends and a couple of teachers. Everyone's been supportive, but Ben's mother, instead of being supportive, seems to say, "Wow, aren't you too young for that?" Or, "Shouldn't you both wait until you get married? Why are you doing it so young?" My boyfriend, a fiancé I guess I should say now, is the man I want to spend the rest of my life with and has been the love of my life for the past 2 years, and I just don't see why people think I need to be a certain age before it just magically gets acceptable to get married. I've been having somewhat of a strained relationship with Ben's mom from the start. One thing I found out about early on was that we come from a pretty different background. You see, I'm an Emirati, whereas Ben's from the States. I come from a very, very large family. I have 8 siblings. cousins who live all over the world, and none of my aunts or uncles live in the same state that I do. Carol assumes because my family is the way we are that I'll settle into some sort of same lifestyle. A quick rundown of rude and passive-aggressive things she's done or said. One of the biggest lies she's told is that I supposedly told her privately that my fiancé is actually gay and is using me as a cover. She told everyone she could that I said this. His friends, their aunts, uncles, and their parents. This happened in the first 2 months of us dating, so it caused a gigantically huge misunderstanding, and as you could guess, he was quite upset, but my fiancé quickly realized the pattern of her being dishonest and no longer believes anything she says about me. Whenever she's on the phone with someone and our dog goes up to greet her, she usually says something along the lines of, "Oh, Nana's baby coming to say hi," which isn't the bad part. She then follows it up with, "Yeah, this is my only chance of having grandkids for a while since they don't plan on having children." Once she realized she could not get to my fiancé, she switched sides, started talking badly about him to me, trying to turn me against him and convince me that he was a bad person. It did not work, and that frustrated her and directed her anger back at me. Anytime we're together, she asks these nosy questions. I was at her house with her for dinner. Out of nowhere, she starts asking how much money I make per hour and how much I work. I felt uncomfortable considering I'm a student who can only work for about 20 hours a week at minimum wage right now. I felt embarrassed and didn't know how to answer it, to be honest with you. She asked stuff about how much money my parents make, what my dad does for a living, how much he makes, or just asked questions about my past relationships. I was in one other relationship that was abusive and does not like talking about. And relationships with family, well, she doesn't talk about anything to me unless it's asking about money. My life, or my family, there's one regular conversation like, "Oh, hey, how was work today?" Instead, no. It'll be stuff like, "Oh, hey, how long did you work today? What hours did you work? How much did you make? Why do you care?" Several times I've tried to make peace with her. I've apologized for causing her worry and requested her not to treat me poorly because what ifs. But she would say stuff like, "You would not understand why I'm doing this because you're not a mother. All mothers have to agree with what I'm doing." She even refuses to help with anything wedding-related because he did not ask for their blessing. When in fact I was the one that decided he should not ask, because I know he would tell them off if they said no. And I was pretty sure they would have said no to him. Ben is super close with his family. They always plan a lot of trips and adventures, and I'd say they usually have about 2 trips a year. When not taking trips, they still find lots of fun things to do close by. It's a pretty big family. He has 2 sisters. Both are a few years younger than him and are not married yet. Whenever we were dating, I was never invited on his family trips. His family could be pretty strict about things, so I figured it's just because of that. So I didn't have to do much of a big deal with it, and didn't say anything. I was hurt, but I didn't want to cause a big old scene. Over the months since then, they've gone to do several things in town together and never really invited me. Sometimes they'll go grab dinner, or go shopping, or simple things like that, and I get left at home. Well, they're planning another family vacation in December over Christmas, a holiday that Ben wants to spend with me and his family. This time, we were engaged. Have been for just 4 days, so I figured that I would be invited, but no. Ben said that it sounds like I won't be able to do it this year either. I finally broke down. Asked him why I never get invited to family stuff, and he just told me that Carol is a very stubborn woman. That's his mom, and she thinks it's only for direct family. When he asked if he could bring his fiancée along, his mother made a face and said something along the lines of, "That would be kind of weird. This is a family trip." Ben told me that it was kind of hurtful to hear her say that because he sees me as part of the family, because we plan on staying together forever. My husband supports me 100%, but apparently he got chewed out by mother-in-law. I'm the kind of person who likes to deal with things head-on. No petty bullcrap, so I call Carol to confront her. I told her that I did not think it was fair that I never get invited. She at first says it's not personal, that she wanted to plan a bunch of activities over the week in Cali and knew I was not the one for long-planned itineraries. Well, I said that's crap because I could come and still hang out with them at the beach and hotel while going to the other planned stuff if I choose. When I made it clear that I didn't buy it, she acted like the crazy one and told me, "We get to go on vacation by ourselves, so I don't know why it's such a big deal." She also said, well, we're not going to pay for a flight and hotel for you either. Choose to stand up to everyone. Things got heated really quickly and she ended up telling me that Ben liked alone time with his family, and that it made him feel like a kid again, which, by the way, is not true. She said that I'm not legally family since we're not yet married, and plus she just likes it being blood family at times. We ended up fighting and I hung up. I'm saying it just would have been nice. It just would have been nice for her to extend the invite, as other family members have always included significant others on the vacation. She was adamant about just spending the vacation with her quote family. So no significant others were invited. I told her that she was being selfish, but she thinks it's her money and her family. So I text both my future sister-in-laws, telling them I'm completely disgusted they all would leave me out of this just because mother-in-law has a petty grudge against me and can't stop being a control freak for 5 seconds. Well, the next morning, I wake up to text after text after text telling me to grow up and that she was only one that did not want me there. Well, this is a very fancy and exotic trip that's paid for almost entirely by Carol. She planned the entire trip. Includes hotels and activities. I mean, she's well off enough to sponsor fancy vacations as she got all the money from the divorce. She and her ex had a vicious divorce, and while he cheated the entire marriage, she cheated one time, and he went on a nasty smear campaign, mental abuse, etc. He berated her to the point tears in front of the judge and called her illiterate. The judge did not like that at all, and well, he's paying out his butt an insane amount of alimony. For clarification, I told her I was going to be paying for my own flight. My train fares, hotel expenses, you name it. I've not apologized as I feel like she's in the wrong. She won't talk to me because she thinks that I was wrong. I feel like doing family trips and excluding non-blood family is a bit too much. Now, my own family loves him. They're almost the complete opposite of his. My dad enjoys when he sleeps over here, and he's nothing but respectful. Even bringing food and treats, and it's very clear he wants nothing but to get along with the family. They're very open and inviting of anybody that comes into their home. They basically make any guest feel welcomed in there, and my mom even personally let him know that he's welcome into their home anytime. He doesn't even need to give them a heads up before coming over. My boyfriend's met every single one of my 25 cousins. He's met my grandparents, all of my aunts and uncles. He's been to a few family weddings even. He's been on my yearly family vacation every single year since we started dating, and he's been to 5 family reunions. But Ben's family was never really inviting whenever I came by. Like, for instance, Carol would provide some leftover food and drinks when I come over, and she'll just stay in her room to avoid any interaction with me. Also, Ben always needed to ask for her permission to let me come over. Sometimes she would come up with excuses as to why I can't come over, and this is pretty much why Ben moved on, but anyways. He asked them if they did not like his partner, but they always insisted that it's not like that. They're just uncomfortable with having me at the house. After being insulted over and over, One day she let me come over, but I did not like it, so I never really did. It led to our first ever tension in the relationship because they planted seeds of doubt in Ben's head. It happened when you're told weekly that something is a certain way, right? Last month, I popped the wedding topic to Ben. We were ecstatic and we started planning immediately. We fixed the date to be mid-October, on our dating anniversary. And then we talked about Carol. He said he knows there will never be a close relationship again, but he just can't imagine not having her there. I gently asked what the point of having her here was if she's not even acknowledging us. He said he gets it, but she is his mother and he just wants to leave the door open and include her in the biggest day of his life. He said, if I really didn't want her there, he would not invite her. I thought he wanted me to be honest and said that I really didn't want her there. Well, that upset him, and he clearly does want her there. So, I asked some opinions, and my mom and bridesmaids all agree that she should not be there. She hasn't earned it, and seeing her will cause me stress. I don't know if I'm being an a-hole, because she is his mom, not mine. And well, I'm not letting him make the decision. But I don't want to take the very huge risk of ruining our wedding day for the basic 0 chance that his mom one day maybe will become half decent. That doesn't exactly bode well for the marriage because how many other big life events are expected to sacrifice for the sake of keeping a woman who hates me in her life? I asked Ben to reach out to her and mention the wedding. Not an invite, but say to her that with the wedding coming up, they could meet up and talk. Ben tried to have a similar conversation with, and she just blankly stared. She would not speak, and I told him that I'll let him make the decision and let him know that I will support any decision he makes. Honestly, the way her messed up brain works, she might have more respect for him if she, quote, shows some backbone, huh? Just a little bit, and didn't invite her. Inviting her will go one of two ways, and this is what I truly think. Number one, she's going to refuse to attend, which only will make Ben feel worse that his own mother doesn't want to be a part of his big day. Number two, she'll show up and be the ominous dark cloud looming amongst everybody and everything at our happy occasion, and will probably say some nasty stuff once the alcohol starts flowing. Finally, Ben accepted that his mother is stubbornly being difficult and would almost certainly ruin the atmosphere at the wedding if she came. I told him we might just send her an announcement. Then she'll know when the wedding is. It puts the ball in her court. Will she be willing to ask for an invitation? But Ben told that it won't work because she's waiting to divorce Ben's father, because she didn't want him to think the cheating hurt her feelings. She never asked about me or the wedding, so we didn't know how to, quote, not invite her. If we told her directly she's not invited, she's totally going to go nuclear. I'm not a fan of this idea. Now, Carol was looking at a dress Ben was seeing on his phone, and he gets a text message from one of our friends, saying that she cannot attend the mother of the bride function as she has an entrance exam on the date fixed. Carol's been irate since then, as we kept her in the dark while we already fixed the date for the function and the wedding. She's been demanding a thorough explanation and threatening to show up unannounced, you know. A few of Ben's aunts and uncles contacted Ben the next day, telling him that he should invite Carol, that he would not even notice her there, and that it was the right thing to do. He gets mad and just answered it was an event. And he would rather not spend money on guests who didn't want to be there, and he wants to spend it on guests who loved and supported him and his fiancée. Now, Carol starts flipping out, making comments like Ben is making the worst decision of his life. She begins making more swear comments on me, saying that I'm worse than the poor person who can't afford even a simple courthouse wedding. So, when this argument happened, I went into full protective mode for my husband and I, honestly. I just didn't want her around me or my family. I don't trust her one bit. Not now. So, I remain calm And I tell her that since my dad's paying for the entire wedding plans, I never told her until now that my father's a millionaire. I have all the rights on earth to choose who should attend the events, and that the wedding was only to be attended by true family, not those who control their own son in the name of being his blood relative. Sometimes we have this false sense often drilled into us that being related by blood, something you have no control over whatsoever, actually is more important than family you choose. But people need to accept blood is not more thick than water. I very politely informed her that I should not hear one more word about her wanting to join a wedding she was never even wished to happen in the first place. Carol was shocked after hearing all this. Bindon told Carol that he would be inviting his father to all the pre-wedding events, and the wedding as well, which, by the way, he's bluffing to her. So if she could not join the event, he would understand. Well, she then marched to the other room, being comforted by Ben's sisters, who are now calling me cruel and selfish. So guys, I came here to ask you, what would you have done? And am I the a-hole for telling her she's not coming? Story 3. I'm 31 and female, and I married Gary about 6 years ago. I love him deeply, but what I don't love so much is my new mother-in-law, Laura. I know from stories that Gary's told me that Laura's always been a lot more supportive of his sister Jenna than she is of Gary. I guess she always wanted girls, so Gary was a disappointment, and she always neglected him growing up, even though it's literally just was not his fault that he was born male. But there's another reason she likes Jenna more than Gary, and it's a lot more recent. Gary and I are child-free, and we don't exactly hate children, but we simply have no interest in having any of our own. We have no interest in having our own, and we really have no interest in babysitting for Jenna, even though she always is trying to push her kids on us. She has 3 of them, and sometimes she'll drop by unannounced to try to drop them off because she, quote, needs a break. Whenever we refuse to take the kids, we usually wind up getting a call from Laura shortly afterward to lecture us about it. As far as Laura's concerned, the fact that both of us work from home means that we have endless time to spend looking after other people's children. We've tried explaining that any time we aren't working, we aren't getting paid. But for some reason, she just does not seem to understand this very simple concept. That brings us to this other big issue, that Gary's family does not seem to understand money. Jenna's constantly trying to beg Gary for money because he makes more work at home and tech than Jenna's husband Lou makes at his sales job. Not only does he make more, but Jenna and Laura assume we have this endless cash to burn, simply because we don't have kids to pay for. Lou's never asked us for money himself, and I actually think it embarrasses him to ask for help. But he also just lets Jenna walk all over us and does not do much to stop her. As a result, Gary and I wind up helping Jenna quite a bit, for no other reason than to avoid Laura's guilt trips. This issue finally came to a head this past Christmas. Gary and I usually take turns visiting our respective families each year. Since we visit my family the year before, it was our year to visit Gary's family, rather than just go to his parents' house. Gary's family likes to all pitch in on big expensive vacations each year. This year, however, things hit a bit of a snag. It started with Jenna asking Gary for money yet again. It's only been a couple weeks since he gave her a huge loan of nearly $6,000, yet she suddenly said she needed even more money to buy presents for her kids. As much as Gary and I don't have anything against Jenna's kids, we're child-free for a reason. If we wanted to spend all our money raising 3 children, we would just go ahead and squeeze some out ourselves. Tired of being asked for money yet again. That's basically what Gary told Jenna when she asked. This inevitably led to a call from Laura lecturing Gary on, quote, shaming his sister for a situation she, quote, could not control. Finally, Gary was done with the whole situation and decided to stand up for himself. He said that if he was going to buy all of Jenna's Christmas presents for her family, then he was not getting anything for her this year. Laura said that we were simply being selfish by not supporting Jenna when we were already saving money by not having to raise kids ourselves. Gary snapped back that he was basically raising Jenna since Laura could not be bothered to do it herself. That's when we've learned that Laura was paying for Jenna's share of the family Christmas vacation this year. She said if she was really such a bad mother and provider, then maybe Gary should just pay for the family vacation himself. I don't really follow her logic, but this led to her basically ordering us to foot the bill for the entire family vacation by ourselves. Even after everything Jenna and Laura have pulled, Gary and I were flabbergasted and utterly shocked. His dad Earl, 67, disagreed with Laura but did not really do much to stick up for me and Gary. He typically just ignores Laura and lets her treat her son however she wants. The worst part is that these guilt trips really get to Gary, even when he knows his mother's being unreasonable. It's not that he doesn't love Jenna or feel bad about when she's struggling, and he hates denying her money when he's afraid that'll punish her kids even more than it punishes her. Well, besides, it's not like Jenna's fault that Laura favored her. She definitely takes advantage of it, but that's kind of how she was raised. Laura really ruined her, and it's impossible to tell how she might have turned out if she had not been so spoiled. So, Gary and I discussed it, and we decided that we did not want to ruin Christmas for the family. If Laura was basically going to hold the family vacation for ransom and threaten to take it away from everyone if we did not pay for it, then we would have no choice but to pay. But that doesn't mean we weren't going to teach Laura a lesson in the process. This past year, our vacation was set for, Machu Picchu. Gary and I bought the tickets and made sure everyone in the family except for Laura and Earl had their tickets well before we showed up at the airport. We then had Earl drive us along with Laura to the airport. As soon as we got to the front of the terminal to check in, we gave Earl his ticket and promptly informed Laura that she would not be getting one. Needless to say, Laura was absolutely furious, and Gary just shrugged and told her that we could not afford a vacation for the entire family. If it was so important to her that Jenna and her kids go for free, then she would be willing to make a sacrifice for the sake of her own daughter, right? Laura was seeing red and started raising her voice to the point that security asked us what the heck was going on. Gary just stayed calm and said nothing was wrong at all. But security said that we'd have to break things up. So, that's when Laura had a whole new reason to be angry, and she agreed to leave and just expected Earl to follow. But we'd already given Earl his ticket, and he said he had no intention of canceling a trip, and he'd been looking forward to. He planned on going on the trip, and Laura pointed out that he had driven and asked him for the keys, but he simply told her he didn't trust her to drive his car when she was acting angry and irrational. Earl doesn't really emote very much, but I kind of got the impression that he was actually just enjoying himself. As I said before, he doesn't really stand up to Laura very much. Me and Gary had basically given him a way to do it without looking like he had gone out of his way to antagonize her. That was frankly part of the plan. In the end, we all wound up having a lovely trip to Machu Picchu, with everyone in the family besides Laura. Jenna felt a little bad when she heard about what we did, and she and Gary didn't really fight for more than one night about it, though. She was busy looking after the kids to really spend much time worrying about it anyways. So, you might wonder why I'm telling you this story now, when all this went down at Christmas. Well, after all that went down, Laura hasn't really talked to Gary at all. To his credit, Gary did leave her a voicemail apologizing but saying that he hoped that she'd learned her lesson and that they could bury the hatchet, and she never responded to it. Now, several months later, Laura sent me a message out of the blue saying that she wanted to talk about what happened with Gary. I asked why she doesn't just talk to her own son like a grown woman, but she said she's not ready. I have no idea where this could be going, but I agreed to have lunch with her to discuss everything, and I'm interested to see where this is going, and I'll definitely update you with more information after I talk to her. I'm skeptical, but I'm hoping maybe she really did learn her lesson. It's definitely about time. Update number 1. I knew I should not have trusted Laura to change. I thought the worst possible thing that could happen would be that she was a little rude at lunch, which is pretty much par for the course with that woman, but she's taken things a lot further than I thought she would. As much as Laura makes Gary constantly help Jenna out with basically everything, that's not to say Laura's literally never done anything for him. The one thing she's never even helped me out with was the student loans. She made both Gary and Jenna the same deal. As long as they finished college, she'd pay off the loans. Since Gary went to grad school at an Ivy League institution, his loans aren't entirely paid off. But again, Laura agreed to make sure that he'd never be the one to worry about it. She's now revoking the offer and informed me that she has not made a payment since the Christmas incident. Meaning, his next payment is way overdue. We weren't getting any calls about it since the bills have been going to Laura before, but she basically went back on their deal, but she did it in such a way that he's going to be surprised with a high-interest payment out of nowhere. Technically, she's within her rights, so there's really nothing we can do about it. But after paying for a family vacation, not to mention all of the money we've given Jenna over the years, this is going to be a huge financial blow. At least if we'd seen this coming, we could have saved up for it. Instead, Laura's made absolutely sure to drop this on us in the very worst way possible. I talked to Gary about it, and the saddest part was that he did not even seem that surprised. I mean, he's not even surprised that Laura chose to tell me about it instead of him. She's always been really bad about facing him directly when it comes to certain things. I think there's at least a small part of her that knows she's in the wrong and perhaps even feeling guilty about the way she treats him. Yet, that never seems to stop her. In this case, she's only willing to continue helping with student loans if we pay for a totally separate vacation for just Laura and Jenna. We aren't even invited to join ourselves. It feels like such a dumb idea. If she's going to demand that we spend all that money, then why would we not just spend it on the student loans? Even Jenna's taken Gary's side this time around because she doesn't like Laura basically using her to emotionally blackmail her son into spending money to, quote, save their relationship. I honestly don't think Gary should even entertain this threat. But he has a lot of trouble walking away from family, and he's always been a really loyal son, and Laura does not appreciate him nearly enough for it. I've agreed to support him no matter what he decides to do, even though I think having Laura out of our lives for good would ultimately be what's best. I have no idea what he's going to choose. I'm worried that he's going to let her continue stomping all over him, but hopefully I'm wrong. Update number 2. I can't believe it. Gary actually followed through on standing up to his mother. What's even more surprising is that we have really had a talk to thank Jenna for. Apparently, as soon as Jenna heard about Laura's demand, she called Laura and said that she's absolutely not going to go on another vacation with her if Gary was forced to pay for it. Jenna and Lou even wrote Gary a check to pay for their part of the Christmas vacation, and Lou recently got a raise, and he said that paying us back is one of their top priorities. They're tired of being treated like charity cases, and they're even more uncomfortable with the implication that Laura does not think they can provide for themselves. Granted, their support doesn't fully solve the problem in its entirety. Laura's getting more and more unhinged. When Jenna voiced her support for us, she told Jenna that she does not want to be supporting our useless, childless marriage. I don't know why I should be surprised that she found a way to bring our child-free lifestyle back into it, but it had not come up in a while, so I guess I'd hoped she might have finally dropped it. Jenna said she, went after me really hard too, implying that I just can't have kids and that Gary would have a family if not for me. I don't even know whether I can have kids or not because I've literally never tried. But I definitely have some feelings about the fact that Laura even thinks it's her business in the first place. And I might not like Laura, but I feel like I've been polite and tactful nearly every step of the way. I haven't even said half of what I want to say to her, because I don't feel like it's my place to do something that might affect Gary's relationship with his own mother. Now, though, I'm starting to think maybe it's about time I dropped the pretense and started putting her in the place. I just don't know how that'll affect Gary. Now, Gary's birthday's coming up, and it's hard not to start contemplating revenge all over again. I mean, Laura wanted us to give Jenna another vacation. Now that Gary and Jenna are on better terms, and Jenna's united with us, maybe it's time for us to go ahead and take another vacation without Laura. I know it sounds petty, especially when we're dealing with financial issues due to Laura pulling her support for Gary's student loans. Going on vacation just for petty revenge would be a bit excessive though, right? But I might go ahead and make that suggestion just to Gary anyways. I want Laura to see that this family is perfectly capable of pulling together and getting along without her. She's taken way too much control over this family, and I don't know, it'd be nice to see her start losing that for a change. At this point, I'm not even sure if it should be about revenge. Maybe the goal should just be keep moving on so that we can release Laura's grip on our household. She has way too much control over Gary's emotions, and I'd love to see him crawl out from under that shadow. But Lou had another idea that I'm considering. I'll update you when we decide what exactly we want to do. I don't want to say too much about it until we've made our decision, especially because Lou's plan might be a bit controversial. It might be pretty interesting if we decide to go through with it, though. Update number 3. At the end of the day, we decided that Lou's idea was too good to pass up. Gary and I discussed it, and we decided to follow through with it. It's hard to tell how exactly things will turn out, but we might have found a way to get revenge while still taking care of Gary's student loans. Since Laura wanted a vacation, Lou suggested we go ahead and give her one, and even after Jenna said she would not go with Laura, she still never dropped it. So we did something similar to our first revenge plan, except this time we did things in reverse. This time we drove Laura to the airport ourselves, and since she'd never asked for a ticket for Earl, he wasn't with us this time. But Laura had pushed Jenna really hard to go with her, so she rode along in the car. This time, however, we really did buy Laura a ticket. The surprise was simply that Jenna did not get herself one. She explained that she hates going on vacations with her mother because Laura spends the whole time trying to control everything. She decides where everybody gets to go and what they do. Plus, Jenna was still mad about the way Laura had treated Gary. She said that she would not even consider going on a vacation with Laura unless she made things right with Gary. For some reason, I was the one that Laura was staring daggers at the whole time, as if she thought this whole thing was all my idea. While I admit that I probably looked a little too much like I was enjoying it, that does not make it my suggestion. If Laura had the least bit of self-awareness, maybe she'd realize just how many people have been wanting to see her get her comeuppance for quite a while now. When she realized we were sending her off alone, Laura tried to call off the deal to resume paying Gary's loans, but Jenna said that if Laura follows through on that, she'll never see her grandchildren again. Considering how much Laura hates us being childless, denying her access to the grandkids was about the greatest threat that Jenna could have made. Then again, considering how little the fear of losing her son has helped change her behavior, it's hard to get optimistic that Jenna's threats will fully make a difference. A part of me doesn't love that we paid for Laura to take a vacation, but Lou did go ahead to make some good points when he was suggesting it. She's going to be trapped in a beautiful place and completely unable to share it with anybody. Well, our hope is that maybe this will just finally show her how serious we all are about wanting to see her change and treat her son better. When she realizes that even the chance to see a beautiful corner of the world isn't worthwhile enough for people to want to spend time with her, maybe she'll finally start to look inward. If she doesn't, then I'm not sure how much longer her relationship with Gary is going to last. It's not that he did not have a backbone before, but he was unusually patient with her, and I don't think he feels up to it anymore. Well, We'll see if she learns anything from this. Maybe it's all a waste of time and all we did was send her on a free vacation. But Gary and Jenna won't just keep giving and giving her a lifetime of second chances, so I'll guess we'll find out when she gets back. Update number 4. This will probably be my last update to this story. Right now, it just seems like the resolution's going to be pretty bittersweet. I feel a little bad for Gary, and surprisingly, I actually feel a bit bad for Laura too. When Laura came back from vacation, it actually seemed at first like she had learned a lesson. She indeed agreed to keep paying for Gary's student loans, and not only that, but she offered to give us some reimbursement for the Christmas vacation. She did not realize that Jenna and Lo had already paid us back, but she at least seemed to recognize that it was unfair of her to ever request that we pay. All of that seemed like a really great sign. Gary and I were so excited, and we could not believe our luck, that she actually seemed to have learned such a strong lesson from being forced to go on a vacation alone. We had always liked Lou's idea, but it was working so well that it almost seemed too good to be true. Apparently, that's because it was. Laura was willing to support us both emotionally and financially, and she only had one thing she wanted in return. She wanted us to have kids. She has 3 grandkids already, and well, I guess that's not enough for her, and it seems that she only cares about making sure each of her kids give her more offsprings. Obviously, this is really just irritating both of us, and it seems like she had finally learned her lesson. Only to pull the rug out from under us in the most bizarrely disrespectful way possible. At the same time, she was crying when she set her terms for the deal. I frankly tend to see Laura as being pretty fake and manipulative, but her tears in this case felt really genuine. I don't completely understand why she cares so much about Gary having kids, especially when Jenna already has several, but it's clearly pretty important to her, and if that's the case, well, then I guess I can kind of understand why she doesn't like me. I don't like it, and I don't really respect it, but I can at least do my best to empathize, even if I'm not 100% convinced that she's really all that deserving of my empathy. Obviously, Gary and I weren't about to give up our entire lifestyle for a woman who's done nothing but cause trouble for us the entire time we've been together. She tried to draw a line in the sand and said that it would ruin their relationship if Gary and I did not agree to her demands. Gary stuck up for me more than ever before. He said that we've been doing just together more than long enough for Laura to accept our lifestyle, and that we would not give in to the demands that disrespected both of us as human beings while trying to deny our agency to make our own decisions about our own family life. Laura wept pretty hard, and I was sure that she'd give up. Surprisingly, she did not. She stuck by her insane demands, and maybe she was trying to call Gary's bluff. If that's the case, though, then it definitely backfired. He stood his ground. They haven't really talked since then, and as far as we can tell, that has not stopped her from continuing to pay off her student loans. So, she seems to care about him, and I guess she just legitimately hates our lifestyle. She even said something during their argument about how would we have had a better time at Christmas if we had kids to share it with. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, and she seemed to earnestly believe it. As for Jenna, she did not wind up fully withdrawing Laura's access to the kids, but she's severely limiting it right now. In the end, it actually had nothing to do with supporting Gary. She's just starting to doubt that their grandmother's really going to be a good influence on them. More than anything, she's worried Laura won't support them if they grow up to embrace any kind of lifestyle. That is not exactly what Laura wants for them. I feel bad for the kids because they don't really understand why they aren't seeing Grandma right now. It's not really fair for the kids to be wrapped up in a situation they did not have anything to do with, and did not choose for themselves. At the same time, I can't really judge Jenna for it. Laura's the one who decided to make things harder than they needed to be. She chose this herself, so it's really on her. Laura does still reach out to me and Gary occasionally, but we've been letting most of her calls go straight to voicemail. It's just so tiring to keep talking to her when nothing ever seems to change. All Gary wants is for his mother to accept the life we've chosen for ourselves. If Jenna and Lou can do it, then his own mother should be able to, and Laura ought to see how hard she's making things for herself. It's starting to affect her own marriage, too, and Earl was not necessarily that attached to Jenna's kids, but he doesn't like being denied access to his own grandchildren, and by extension his own daughter. Simply because Laura went and picked a fight that she had no good reason to be picking anyways. I have not heard him say anything about divorce, but supposedly he's been giving Laura the silent treatment quite a bit since Jenna stepped bringing the kids around. There was one recent discussion that's worth mentioning, though, and I think it might be a good note to end on. Last week, Laura called me. I wasn't really paying attention and answered the phone before looking at the caller ID to see who was calling, and if I'd seen it, I might not have answered, you know. She called to say that Gary's loans would be fully paid off by the end of the year, and she wanted to know what would happen when all that was taken care of. I told her that was really up to her. For once, she did not argue. She said she'd be paying for this year's vacation to make up for things. I reminded her that it was our turn to visit with my own family this year, so we would not be going on that vacation. She seemed to understand and did not put up a fight. She just told me that she hoped we'd had a good Christmas. I know that's a really small consolation after everything she's put us through, but it does give me a bit of hope. Maybe another few months of distance will help, and maybe she'll keep looking inward and learn to accept that we're never going to be the parent she wants us to be. At the very least, I think she's finally been beaten down enough that she might learn to be a little bit less controlling. I don't think we'll ever have a perfect relationship with her. We certainly won't have that kind of relationship that Gary wanted. There's too much history and too much pain to bank on that happening at some point. But if she can just stop being controlling and calm down a bit, then we can at least finally have some peace between us, and if that's the best we can do, I guess I'll take it. I know a lot of people just think we should drop all contact, but that's not what Gary wants. And I intend to support my husband. Well, I just hope his own mother can learn to finally start doing the same.
Story 4.
Hello, I'm Sarah, and me and my husband Adam have been married for a long time now. We even have a kid named Noah together. This is all just say we know each other and each other's family quite well by now. We were college sweethearts who got married after we both got stable jobs and could afford things without our parents' help in any way. Both of our parents weren't super rich growing up, but they never had issues either. I met Melissa, my current sister-in-law, for the first time when she wasn't even a teenager. She must have been about 10 when I first met Adam's family. It was clear from the way that she treated that she was everyone's favorite. She was the youngest, after all. I liked her enough back then, and she was quiet, if not shy, and I liked the attention her family gave her. Adam especially adored her, especially because she was a decade younger than him. He confided in me that it was often him to take care of his baby sister when their parents were off to work. That had led them to be super close, and he was so close that he was her biggest confidant growing up. I always adored that about them because I did not grow up with siblings of my own. I would not even try to be an expert about siblings. Things started to go wrong when she entered her rebellious teenage years. She started to be outspoken about things which initially I liked, but I never told Adam about it. I thought it was natural for kids to grow into themselves and to see resistance from their parents at the time, and after all. But soon I realized she was growing brattier by the year. Even then, Adam loved her, so I did not mind this change as my contact with her was limited. During her first year of college, though, she got into a lot of trouble. At this time, me and Adam had gotten married, so I kind of had the front seat on what happened at the time. My parents-in-laws loved Melissa, but to teach her a lesson, they gave her an ultimatum. They stopped paying for her college and told her to work for herself to pay the tuition. Adam did not like this very much. He was very protective of the people around him, especially Melissa, so when he wanted to pay for her tuition fee himself, I did not hold him back. I like that he had her back, even if it weren't against his own parents. Behind Adam's parents' backs, we started to pay for her tuition, and later on we found out that her parents had offered to start paying her tuition again, having had a change of heart for their little girl. Melissa had angrily refused without giving them any further explanation of how she would be paying it. It was okay for some time until Melissa started to ask Adam for more money about 3 years ago for other frivolous things. Adam initially complied, but we soon found out that she dropped out of college. Adam had a huge fight with Melissa, right in our house. When it was over, Adam told me that he was scared for his sister's future, and I understood it. Either way, he was a big protective brother at heart. I understood that as well, and so we kept paying for her and helping her financially. For the past 3 years, we've been supporting my sister-in-law behind our family's back as she tries to get her footing. As far as I know, she's quit or been fired from many jobs, but she loves flaunting things that she buys with Adam's money for her family. Adam reluctantly lets her in. For example, a few months ago, she'd showed up with a bag from a very expensive luxury brand that she got so many compliments for. But when I saw Adam's face, he was not happy about this behavior of hers. But then we were the ones paying her apartment rent and for her designer clothes and bags. Nobody knew. Melissa didn't tell them either. I think I heard her say something mean to her cousin who was not in the best financial situation at the time. About her clothing, this happened a few times, and it was clear to both of us that Melissa was a bit materialistic, and maybe the way her parents and Adam had pampered her was at fault for it. So one day, Adam came to me with a brilliant plan. Christmas was approaching fastly, and Adam decided that instead of giving Melissa a designer watch as we planned earlier, we should give her some sentimental that would remind her that we support and love her and that material things weren't everything. We brainstormed ideas that night, and our 4-year-old son told us that we saw a TikTok of someone making a huge card with so many pictures in it. We all got to it. Adam and I spent hours collecting our family's pictures with Melissa and made a thick card. Even our son helped, and Adam has had so much fun and hoped that Melissa would love his hard work. He thought it would bring them closer, and it was actually an impressive card. It had so many unique pockets and maneuvers to see all the pictures and notes. It looked very professional, if you ask me. On Christmas Day, as Melissa opened her gifts from other family members, she was very happy. She got designer things from my in-laws, and that made Adam a bit nervous, but he hoped that Melissa knew how much he loved her and would appreciate his hard work. Just in case he had still gotten a designer watch for her, she was, after all, still his babysitter. When Melissa opened our gift, her face fell, and she looked at us in confusion for a second, and she said, "A card?" With a very disgusted face, then she asked us if we were so cheap that we could not even buy her a proper present. Adam's face fell off. Our son encouraged her to open it, but Melissa ignored him, which made me so angry, and Noah grew silent and retreated back into me. After all, it was his gift idea. She said that our gift was nothing in comparison to our parents' and family gifts. She called us petty for pulling such a stunt on her. She made Adam and I feel so cheap in front of everybody, and she did that knowing that only we know that we were paying for her lifestyle at this point. Adam, in anger and embarrassment, did not give her the backup watch either. I was embarrassed myself. I almost blurted out that we were paying for everything she had, but I kept my tongue held. She was Adam's sister, after all. Well, my mother-in-law, Bertha, was not very thrilled about our gift either. She told me that we should have tried harder, that Adam should have tried harder, and that Melissa is his only sister. She could not understand how Adam, who cared so much about his sister, could do something this petty to her. In short, she implied that I influenced Adam to give his sister a petty gift. I kept my mouth shut, not wanting to reveal too much without Adam's approval. It is the day after Christmas, and when we went to bed last night, Noah apologized and cried to me, saying that he should have just let his dad give his aunt the watch that he was planning to give her before. I told him that it was a great gift, and this was not his fault that she did not appreciate such a thoughtful gift. Well, I'm sure her card is still unopened in my in-laws' living room downstairs. Even Adam's spirits were down for the rest of the day as well, and I tried to cheer him up, but it was clear that his mood was ruined, and by the end of the day, Adam was ready to talk about how disappointed he was in his sister. He blamed himself for being so compliant and supportive of his sister, even when their parents had been right all those years ago when they stopped paying for her expenses. I did not disagree with that. Melissa needed to do better. If not for us, then for herself. He does not want to support her forever after all, so I suggest we do the same thing as his parents did all those years ago. Adam was horrified. He was not mad at me for suggesting it. He just said that I would not understand as I did not have a sibling. I kind of agree with that. I would not understand the bond Adam was having with Melissa. I don't have any plans to pressure him into it, but I do wish that he would at least consider the suggestion. Since this morning, she has not even looked at us, giving us a cold shoulder. Bertha is also like that. Melissa even ignored our 4-year-old when he asked her to help him with something, and I am livid. But overall, he did not want to teach her a lesson, so I did not tell my in-laws about who paid Melissa's expenses, neither did we stop paying for her. Well, I'm tempted to do it though. I'm tempted to just tell everybody who wants to listen that she was cruel in front of us to our extended family like that. It was humiliating for us. Any advice on whether I should do something or either of those things, please let me know. Or hey, maybe something entirely different. Top comments from the original post. Comment number 1 says this: I think you and Adam should take a step to show Melissa that she cannot take you guys for granted like that. She's been horrible to you, especially after knowing fully well that you guys have been paying for her expensive lifestyle for years. She needs to learn to be financially independent. Not everybody has such a supportive family behind them, and they still manage to get their footing, so she should be fine without such pampering. Anyways, she's 24. Everybody struggles at that age. She's not special and needs to take responsibility for her own actions. She needs to learn that her actions have consequences and that she should just respect other people's feelings and efforts too. Nobody should be taken for granted, especially family. But I understand that family's relationships can definitely be complicated. I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck, and I'm sure that you'll be able to do the right thing for your family. Comment number 2. Okay, so let me get this straight. Your husband and his parents always made her feel special and supported her, and suddenly when she gets into trouble, you guys just bailed on her. That's toxic parenting right there. Of course she's a bit bratty. She grew up in an environment that benefited her by being like that. Yes, her reaction was not the best. Everybody knows that. She should have been grateful, but blaming her for her upbringing is wild. How is it her fault that she was everyone's favorite, hence everything? If you wanted her to grow up differently, maybe your husband should have set boundaries with her when she was a kid and not given her everything when she was so young. And now you just talk about a lesson. Let's just call it what it actually is. This is revenge. Do you want to take revenge for something she did not have control over? That sounds crappy and petty. Update number 1. Hey, it's Sarah again with an update. It's not been long at all. In fact, it's the day of the new year. The days after Christmas were tense in my in-laws' house, where we were just spending Christmas and the new year. The home decorations were odd given the awkwardness of the family. There have been many birthday comments from both Melissa and Bertha, my mother-in-law, always behind Adam's back. Well, one of the few days I remember Noah was in a good mood. He usually likes playing with my purses, pretending that, well, they are her daddy's briefcase with important documents. He randomly picked up Melissa's purse, which was sitting in the living room. When Melissa strolled in, she was mad at Noah, as I could tell, but at least she did not yell at him. She told him that her purse was way too expensive to be touched like that. I told her it's okay, Noah's never ruined any of my purses, and he treats the purses like Adam treats his briefcase. Then Melissa told me that if only I had given her a new purse, maybe she could have Noah just playing with this one. Well, I told her that the card was a thoughtful gesture from us, a sign of our love and our support for her. She said that it was a sign of being cheap and petty. Anyone could make a card, even a nursery kid. His brother would never give her something like that unless he was manipulated. Well, I told her to say what she wanted straight to my face and not talk in circles then. She's accusing me of being a bad influence on her brother and stealing her protective brother from her. Adam, in his right mind, would never gift her something like that unless I poisoned his mind with false thinking. Of course, all that was a lie. I've never tried to step into their relationship ever. I know and respect Adam for his love for his sister, but I was so mad that I wanted to fling the fact that we were not cheap. Otherwise, we would not be paying for her expensive lifestyle. But some of the other family members had entered the room. Once Bertha implied that I was now part of their family, I should know better. I should have persuaded Adam to give her the petty card, that we can do better. There were a few more times when we were made to feel crappy, some in front of the extended family too. I've had enough. Once we were back at our house, I told Adam about every mean and cruel thing his sister and mother had said to me, and he was so disappointed but not angry. I was angry. So I announced that I was going to stop paying for her expensive lifestyle if she could not even be grateful to us for it. Adam was reluctant, but I told him that if he ever wanted his sister to be financially independent, this would be the only time to do it. So when I called Melissa over to tell her about our decision, he did not say much. Melissa was of course mad, and I told her that it was her own habits that forced me to make this decision. She spends too much of our money on expensive luxury items when frankly she should be focusing on building a stable future. She yelled at Adam to handle his wife better than this, and I could not interfere with their sibling relationship. Well, at this point, Adam had just walked away, and when he was gone, she accused me of being a thorn in her side ever since I married Adam. Honestly, I don't feel any remorse for doing this. I think I should. After all, it wasn't her fault that he grew up in a very loving and pampering family. She's just always made to believe that she would always have a safety net to fall back to, either with her parents or her brother. Do you think we made the right decision? Let me know. Update number 2. Hey, it's Sarah again. I have an update on my sister-in-law's situation. It's been about a month, and ever since our last fight, we have not seen Melissa as there haven't been any family events. Melissa has not contacted us either. However, through my father-in-law, who contacted Adam, I found out that Melissa had asked her parents to pay the rent for her apartment, saying that she's lost her job and cannot afford to pay this month. Adam told him to not pay for it, or she would ask them to do it forever. My father-in-law must have told my mother-in-law, as my mother-in-law had called me soon after. He told me that I should be a good wife and persuade his son to help Melissa out this month. She's hardworking and will find another job in no time like she has for the past few years. Having had enough, I told her everything. I told her that we have been paying for her apartment ever since she got it. All the expensive things that she's been flaunting for years were brought by Adam and my hard-earned money. And Melissa has not had a job for the past few months. She was codependent, and if they helped her, Melissa would start to take them for granted just like she did us. Hearing this, she was shocked and scoffed at me. She said that Melissa was paying for her things with her management job, that helping family here and there was not a big deal, but we had been paying for everything. She said that it's clearly a lie. Melissa had not mentioned anything about this. I should stop spreading lies, she said, about Melissa to her own mother. If this was how I manipulated Adam into being a bad brother. She was horrified, thinking that I was forming a rift between siblings for my own amusement. I was shocked and hurt that she would not believe me, so I told her that if she did not believe her daughter-in-law, she should just ask her son about it and cut the call. I'm so angry at both of them right now. How dare she call me a liar? After I told Adam of his mother's reaction, he did think that telling them about it was the right thing to do. Maybe that would teach them not to help her instantly. You see, he talked to his mother too, who could not believe that his son had never told her about any of this. He told her that he just wanted his sister to succeed, and if some help was what she needed, he was ready to provide it, but it had been too much lately. There were no apologies for what she had said to me, of course. Mother-in-law did persuade his husband to pay for Melissa, though this just for a month. Their precious daughter will get her feet soon enough, and I did not harbor any such hope. If she could not do it in the last 3 years with our help, she would not be doing it with their help either. Update number 3. Hey, it's Sarah. It's been some time, I know, about 3 months to be exact. We've been to Adam's parents' house a couple times, and Melissa has also been there. Adam once overheard his parents talking about Melissa by mistake. His father had conceded to Bertha that they could no longer afford to pay for Melissa's extravagance if they wanted to save anything for their own future. Adam had been so sad for them and angry that Melissa did not even have a little care for her actions were harming her own family. She was still buying expensive things and living in that too expensive apartment. Just last week, Bertha and Rob sat us all down for dinner to have a serious discussion. They brought up Melissa's reckless expenses. Melissa immediately lashed out, saying that they were just like me, not giving her enough time to get her footing. Bertha tried to intervene as gently as possible because it's not about Melissa. It's about the fact that they really could not afford to support her anymore. She tried to console her, saying that this doesn't mean that they're giving up on her. They don't want her to not be successful. Melissa then told her to persuade us to pay for her in the meantime. I flat out declined it. I told her if she was going to be ungrateful, she would not have any sort of support from us at all. She did not dare blaming me for anything in front of everyone, though. Bertha instead went to Adam, knowing his protective big brother instinct would kick in. She told him to support his sister. It would just be for a few months, but Adam would not budge, and told her that, well, was exactly what she said when Melissa had come to get their help. She clearly would not be learning her lesson unless everybody dropped their support. She needed to be more responsible. This would be an excellent situation for her to learn this life lesson. Rob, having had enough of his bratty daughter, told her to cut down on her expenses, period. He told her to stop buying those unnecessary luxury bags and designer clothes instead. Well, Melissa was angry, saying that she could not even believe that her own father did not want her to live in comfort. She asked if they wanted her to be poor, struggle, and have no respect in front of the extended family. By this time, Melissa had had enough, and I had left the house without even touching her dinner. Bertha could not believe us for letting her daughter be angry at her like this and saying that we would not do anything to help Melissa. Well, she was angry with all of us. She left for her room as well, and Rob just stayed and apologized. I mean, it wasn't really necessary, and we finished our dinner alone. And helped Rob clean up before we left. This only confirms that this was the right decision. Clearly, Melissa is not going to get better even after taking her parents' help. Update number 4. Hey guys, it's me again, Sarah. I have an update on my sister-in-law's drama. It's only been 2 weeks since Melissa got mad and just walked out of our family dinner after everybody declined her financial assistance. She was finally forced just to leave her apartment and move into another. We'd shown up to help pack and even paid for the movers. As we helped Melissa pack, she whispered to me that it was all my fault. If I had not given her that stupid gift, none of this would have happened. I told her that if she had just accepted the gift and been grateful, none of this would have ever happened. We spent most of the day packing, and I suggested to Bertha that maybe Melissa could sell some of the luxury bags. Bertha had not taken it in stride, and she told me that paying for her again would be an even better decision. At least the family would not have to be humiliated like this. I just ignored her. They both whined the whole time, and Bertha still could not fathom how her son could let the daughter stay in such unfortunate circumstances. The new apartment wasn't that shabby. Everybody in their early 20s had to live in an apartment like this. Adam and I did too in our days. Everybody had to start somewhere, and simply, Rob had found this affordable apartment for her with his own contacts. The new apartment was big enough for a single person, but clearly not for Melissa because she was furious. She announced that she could not believe that her family was letting all of this happen to her. Everything over a stupid Christmas card. I told her that it was not just about a Christmas card. She told me that it was easy for me to say that I still had Adam with his money. Taken aback, I froze. That was not true at all. It wasn't just Adam, but my hard-earned money as well that paid for her stupid apartment. Adam had pounced on his sister and he started yelling at her for the first being ungrateful and now just plain cruel. Bertha had told him to calm down, and Melissa was just down on her luck and in a bad mood because she had left her previous apartment. Adam had had enough and led me out of there in that instant. On our way back, he was seething. He rambled about how his sister could never even muster a small thank you for helping her move, let alone for taking care of her financially. He kept apologizing to me for letting his sister talk to me like that as well. I tried to calm him down. It was not his fault. He should be easier on himself and not take on the blame. But I know Adam is very disappointed in his sister as well as his mother. I tried to cheer him up with the prospect of Noah's birthday, which is in a few days. At least Adam now sees Melissa and her childness a bit clearly. Update number 5. Hello, it's Sarah again with another update, and it's only been a couple of days, not even 2 weeks yet. And yesterday we celebrated my son's birthday at home. We invited some of our family and Noah's friends over. We, of course, also invited Melissa. She's Noah's aunt after all, and sure, we have not had any sort of significant contact with her since the day that we left her in her new apartment, but she is still family, you know. Things were going really great, and the kids were playing in the backyard as they drank on some sodas. Us adults were keeping an eye on them and having a little fun of our own in the living room. Maybe Melissa got too drunk, or it was just her personality, but she stood up and walked to me. She said loud enough for everybody to hear, including our extended family present in the room, that she could not believe how selfish we were. We can afford to throw a lavish party for our son while denying her of any sort of financial help at all in her time of need. My cheeks burned with embarrassment because she was lying again. We can afford it, but that wasn't the point that we wanted her to learn. She was manipulating the situation to paint us as the bad guy, to paint me as the bad guy. Adam told his sister to shut up and sit down. Melissa lashed out at him instead, and I say that, of course, he'll do exactly what I tell him. I have him wrapped around my little finger. He manipulates him so much that he has no love for his little sister anymore. She called me names, at which point Adam had had enough. He pushed her sister out of the room, and I, Bertha, and Rob followed, apologizing to the others for her unruly behavior. Instead of Adam being the one to finish it, I told Melissa to leave. I told her to leave and never to come back, and she was no longer invited to my house. Bertha was horrified, but Adam told her to stop. I was not overreacting because Melissa thrashed in his grip until Adam left her to the front door. Adam tells her that he has finally seen her true colors and has accepted that she's never going to change. Then he slammed the door in her face. I went back and apologized for the scene and said, well, sorry for everybody that witnessed. At least the kids were oblivious in the backyard, drinking their sody pops. The extended family was sympathetic, and we went back to celebrating. At the end of the day, Rob told us that he had enough of his daughter as well, and he had no longer given or let Bertha give Melissa even a single penny. She needs to learn a lesson and needs to learn how to struggle. Bertha was still mad at us and her husband for our decision, but Rob will keep an eye out for his wife, and I just feel so much better. I can finally stop thinking about my sister-in-law's toxic drama. Adam was sad, but I'm so grateful that he stood up. For me, just like that. Update number 6. Hello, it's Sarah, hopefully for the last time. It's been about 6 months since my last post, so I thought I would update you guys about how my life is going. First of all, we've not seen Melissa at all. We've received calls and texts from her asking for help, and Adam refused. It ends up with Melissa having to pay her own rent after working on her own. Rob did not let Bertha interfere either, and I know it must have been difficult for all of them to see Melissa suffer and struggle like that, especially Bertha. But ever since we cut off ties with her, I felt a sense of peace. Not having to interact with such toxic people has made me relax a bit. Adam has also been doing great, focusing on his work and family life more, and I cannot be more grateful that all this is over finally. Bertha's no longer as angry with us as before, and mind you, she's still mad that we did not help her daughter. But when they came over, she brings dessert with them. She also babysits with Noah without any complaints. She even went to brunch with me and my mother once. It's a slow process to mend our relationship with her, but better slow than never. She's been keeping tabs on Melissa, and all the news we get about her is through her. Melissa finally took up my advice and sold some of her designer clothing and bags to better support herself. She's still, between jobs though. Adam just hopes that she'll get a handle on herself and no one will have to interfere with her life again. I think we did the right thing, and I've been breathing a bit better ever since we cut off ties with her.
Story 5.
My father was not the same person anymore. He had turned into a beast who would drink all day, gamble, be abusive. Moreover, he had made my life hell. Do you think it was justified in any way? All he deserved was a good lesson, and that's exactly what I did. I was born into a small and happy family, and my father worked at a multinational company in a reputed post. He worked hard to provide us with everything, which he indeed did. I was the only daughter for quite a few years, but later, I became the eldest sister of 2 sisters and a brother. My mom was a homemaker kind of woman. She didn't actually work or even have a job, but she was the one who maintained everything at home. My father depended on her for almost everything, and she had to look after the family and the house. Back then, we had a luxurious life, a life that only one can dream about. My father bought a huge house which had several rooms and was beautifully built. With the passage of time, my father's business flourished and life was getting even better, but nothing is everlasting. I still vividly remember that Christmas. My mother had arranged a small family dinner, and she invited my grandpa every year, so it was more like a tradition for us. We used to be very excited for this day, as Grandpa would bring us a number of exciting gifts. My mom had taught me baking, and I loved to bake. We would bake cakes on every occasion, especially Christmas, and I would always ask her to let me bake independently, and then she did, and everybody loved it. That Christmas, I baked a cake for Grandpa, as he had asked me the previous year. I was eagerly waiting for him. I like to be appreciated by him, like every normal kid does. My grandpa was a school teacher, and that pretty much just explains his disciplined character. He had strong moral values, and he would never let anyone get off track. To us, he was a very sweet and loving, but upon mischievous behavior, he would punish us lightly. But my father was too scared of him. He knew that he would get beaten up if he did anything wrong. Out of everyone else, he loved me the most. I thought the reason we had such a strong bond was because I was the firstborn and spent quite a long time with him. I would always crawl into his bed at night and listen to his made-up stories. I was a good listener. That Christmas Eve, he arrived at our house, and as soon as the ring of the bell, my younger siblings ran to open the door, shouting his name. Oh, goodness! They were so excited. I had to help Mom in the kitchen with the dinner. It smelled so good. I could see the snowflakes falling like cotton from the window. Yes, the moment was magical. Dinner was ready, and we were all sitting at the dining table listening to his stories about his journey. He would usually do things like that, come up with fake stories, and I'd grown up, which was why I figured out that nothing he told me was true. But my siblings still believed it all. We were all laughing and having fun, and I went to the kitchen to bring the cake. When I returned, what I saw was absolutely unbelievable. I dropped the cake on the floor when I saw my mom. She was collapsed on the floor. My younger siblings screamed, and I was unable to understand any of it. What had just happened? It all changed in a moment. I'd never seen change of time that quickly, and well, my father called the ambulance in an emergency. I can still remember the sirens of the ambulance and people carrying my mom to the stretcher. My father left us with Grandpa, and we had no idea what was going on. I asked Grandpa if Mom was going to be all right, and he reassured me that nothing was going to happen to her and she might have fainted because she had worked the whole day and had gotten sick. I could not sleep the whole night. I kept praying for my mom to get well. That was the only gift I wanted from Santa this year. The next morning they returned. Mom looked weak and pale. How could anybody get so sick in just a day? I hugged her and cried like a baby. I was so scared to lose her. She told me that she was fine and that everything was going to be okay. I was happy to see her fine, and life went back to normal. Grandpa went back and we all got busy in our lives, and one day, Mom and Dad called me to their room. My father said that I was the oldest one, the most mature, and they could share stuff with me. My heart was sinking as the expression clearly indicated that it was something unhappy or worrisome. And then I got to know the worst news of my life that day. My mom was suffering from a brain tumor. She was diagnosed with it that Christmas Eve when she collapsed, and this explained the bundle of medicine on her bedside table. Then I came to know what it was all about. It was a tough time for me. It could not be true. Why her? My brain was unable to accept what they were trying to tell me, and I could not imagine my life without her. And what about my younger siblings? How were they going to react? It all seemed so blurry and confusing. Years after breaking the news to me, my mom got admitted to the hospital. Eventually, everybody came to know what she was sick from, and meanwhile, I had an exam, a very important testing. It was so hard to concentrate in the situation, and all the responsibilities just fell directly on my shoulders. While my mom was at the hospital, I had to look after my siblings, and I also needed to concentrate on my exams and stuff. And my mother's health was not improving. Rather, she was losing it day by day. And then one day we got the news that she's passed. She died. I felt as if everything collapsed at that moment, and obviously it wasn't just me who got affected. The whole family was affected too, and I somehow took the exam and passed it with flying colors. It was a lot going on in parallel, and it was hard to figure out. Those were the most challenging days of my life, but I had no idea that it was about to get even worse. The day my mom died, my father left everything. He had no idea about his business and what was going on, so he stopped going to the office, and all day he would lock himself up in his room. I was scared to lose my other parent, too. With such a condition, I was the only one left to take care and look after my siblings. Dad never showed up from his office, and they've been contacting me to find out if he would join them again, or if they should hire someone else. I kept asking Dad what his plans were, but he seemed uninterested. He had a really good job, and after losing it, he was never going to have such a good chance again. But he didn't want to continue. I was helpless. And then that day came when they sent him a letter which said that he was fired, and he didn't have to show up again. My father didn't even care. He didn't give a damn. He asked me to manage the house, and I've done it. All the money he had saved was used for gambling, drinking. I would see my friends and girls of my age even partying and enjoying their lives, but I had no time for that. I would wake up at 5 in the morning and start preparing for my siblings' school. I had to make sure that they had everything they needed. I didn't want them to realize that they didn't have a mother. I had to become that mother, obviously. Of course, I could not replace my own mom, but I could at least fulfill her duties. It was a very difficult time to manage at first, and I was overwhelmed with so many things coming my way. Sometimes I would end up crying in my room, but at least I was able to keep it all going. Update number 1. Well, I became used to all of it. Knowing I was the one who had to manage it all, it was not that difficult after all. I got a job in a bank as an accountant, and I appeared to, many competitive exams for the job. Luckily, I got the job and was going to get a good salary, so it all felt somewhat right. But again, I had a lot of things to manage. All the utility bills, my siblings, fees, bills, groceries, you name it. I had to do it all while my father stayed out of the house, not even caring about us. He would return home late at night, drunk, and would use abusive words. I was done with him, but what could I have done? At times, my siblings and I would wake up with this loud, muffled screaming. He was no more like the person whom I knew, and that was painful. Imagine losing a person you rely on to drinks and gambling. He had no concern with how I was managing finances, and he would ask me for money, which he would use to buy himself and his friends drinks. It made me angry. I worked so hard at the office to earn that money, which he wasted for his pleasures. And then there were my siblings, coming to me with their own needs. My sister Nina asked me to buy her a fancy dress or an event at school, and it was the end of the month, and I had very, very little money left. I was barely making any extra money for savings. We had never seen these days in our life before. We had a different life back then when my mom would take us shopping every week and we would have so many dresses. We had everything in excess, but now when Nina asked for just a dress, I was unable to provide it for her. I tried to be honest with her and just told her that it was a bit of a tough time for me, as it was the end of the month, and she just quietly went back to her room, but I'd already seen the tears in her eyes. I thought to myself, what could I possibly do to remove the tears from my baby sister's eyes? So, the whole day, I kept thinking about it. Maybe I should ask for a loan or ask my boss for a salary in advance, and I had made up my mind, but I was very, very nervous. I've never asked anyone for money, and it felt so embarrassing to ask my boss for an advance salary. I mean, it would have looked like I was begging. Still, I went to him and told him that I had some emergency at home and for that I needed money. But it was of no use. He said that it's not possible for a few days and I could come again after 2 days' time, but I needed the money that day. So I could not wait anymore. I knew that he would never give me the advance salary I needed, so I should not have asked him in the first place. I was furious at my father. He had been taking money from me for his trash drinks, and I would not be running out of money now. Even my boss asked why I needed a loan when I was already being paid such a good salary, and he was right. It was all Dad's fault. But I had to suffer. Why? I had no answer to it. I needed somebody to rant to. For that I called an old friend to share my burden with her, and she had been the only one to ever listen to me. And then, thanks to her, she came up with a brilliant idea, a lifesaver even. She remembered how good a baker I was, and she introduced me to an online baking business. I could take daily orders and get paid for them daily, and with that, I would not run out of money, and not at the end of the month or any time. Really? Brilliant! Why didn't I think of this before? Dumb, stupid me. Still, for the time being, she lent me some money for Nina's dress, which I promised to return to her as soon as possible. Update number 2. I started working on it immediately. I was not sure if my business would run. People would just actually place orders. Honestly, I wasn't very hopeful, but then it started. I was so excited when I received my first order, and to be honest, I was very nervous. But I still managed to do it. I was so surprised to receive so many orders and get excellent reviews, and after a long time, I was that happy. Even my siblings started helping me with household chores, knowing that now I have to bake for the part-time business I was running. At least with that money, I could buy my siblings whatever they wanted, and they didn't have to hear no to anything they said ever again. But my father's demands elevated too, and when he saw me earning so well, he asked for more money. Well, which I did not want to give him, obviously. His demands were not the only thing to be taken care of. At such a young age, I was handling everything. Still, he had no guilt for what he was doing, and he would sleep all day and do literally nothing. He was not the man anymore. He just wanted money. I'm not even sure if he even cared that I was his daughter. The only thing he asked for was money, and that was what he truly cared about. Update number 3. It was Christmas again, and this Christmas always reminded me of the one when my mother got sick. I could not erase it from my memory, and we stopped having parties or dinners anymore, no Thanksgiving, nothing at all. It was my mom who would have made everyone happy. Even Grandpa stopped visiting us, and life had never been the same. I had so many orders for cakes and cupcakes because of the Christmas holidays, and it was good that I had days off from the office, so I could just properly concentrate on baking. While I was cleaning the kitchen, Dad came and said that I needed to buy gifts for everyone on Christmas. And, oh gosh, not again, I thought. At first I could not believe him, and I thought about why I should be doing what I was doing when it's a parent's responsibility. I mean, why even? How could they even cross his mind? Weird. But I clearly told him that I was not going to do that, as I already was indebted and there were a lot of things to be taken care of. And why would he even ask me this when he knew that he was not even spending a single penny on us? But nothing affected him. He said that I had to do it no matter what, and that he knew that I was earning a lot of money, and I just didn't want to give anything to him. After giving all I had to him, he still asked me where the money was going, and it was getting above my head, and I could not stand it anymore. I had to stop it. It was last working day before Christmas, so I had a lot of work at the office and I didn't want to spoil my mood any further, so I went out. In the evening, I came home late and I was so tired and sleepy as I'd been up early in the morning, and had a lot of work at the office and had to go grocery shopping. When I stepped inside the house, what I saw was shocking. I could not believe my eyes, and I could vividly remember the scene later too. Everything was scattered on the floor. All the books from the book rack were lying on the floor, the vase was broken, and its pieces were scattered everywhere. It looked like hell. The couch pillows were lying around on the floor without covers, and the lounge looked as if it was a total mess. It would take me days to clean all that up, and I was burning with anger. I had to know who did that. I called them all out of their rooms and asked them to tell me who had been doing it, honestly. 3 of them were standing in front of me scared, and none of them looked up at me. That was making me even more furious, and I yelled at them because I wanted them to know how mad I was. I mean, come on. I'd been doing so much for them, and instead of helping me out, that was what they did. I asked them why they did it when they knew that I would have to clean it all up, and I already had a lot of things to do. And then I heard my father saying that he did it. I was losing my mind. So that was all his doing, and when I saw him smiling guiltlessly, my head spun. It was clear that he did it just to annoy me because I didn't want to listen to what he said, and that I simply was not doing what he wanted. He warned me that he would keep doing it if I didn't listen to him and fulfill his demands. What could I have done then? I had no other option but to agree. I said that I would buy everybody gifts, but for that, he would have to behave well and not do what he did. He promised not to do anything like that again. I was relieved, and my father was undoubtedly turning into a child. But I had another plan for him. It was not that easy to be defeated, I thought. Update number 4. Hey guys, it's me, I'm back. He was still up for it, and later that night, Dad knocked at my door. When I checked that time, it was 2 a.m, and when I opened the door, it was him asking for money. There again, I was sick of it, but I was not surrendering that easily and had to be stopped. I denied his request, and that again made him absolutely furious. I was not going to give him a single penny, no matter how furious he got, and everything has a limit, but he had forgotten that. I told him that I would be buying gifts for everybody from his allowance, so that he should not be expecting anything that month. After telling him that, I went back to my bed to sleep. I knew it was not pleasing him, but it had to be this way, but I didn't know that he was about to cross all his limits. That following day, I woke up early and checked my Instagram. It was 7 a.m, and I already had 3 orders. I needed to hurry and just get started, and after some time, Nina, Ben, and Leah woke up, and I was done with a cake. And for the other, I needed some ingredients, which had ended. I asked Ben to go to the store and get some of it, and I already prepared breakfast for them so that when they woke up, they would have the breakfast ready. Ben grabbed the sandwich in his hands and asked me for more money that he could bring the stuff with, and I asked him to take it from my bag. He returned empty-handed and said that there's no money in the bag, and I could not believe him at first. It was impossible. I myself kept cash in my wallet, and I clearly remember it even now, and I was very sure. But when I asked my brother to bring me the bag, there was my empty wallet, not a single penny. I knew where the money had gone. I walked straight to my dad's room, sleeping peacefully on the couch, drunk. Bottles of wine were lying about all over the floor. Did he really go and steal from my bag? Oh, that is what he did. How could he? Thank God I hadn't kept all my money in the bag. I have a locker in my cupboard, which he didn't know about, and I've kept my money in it. I appreciate myself for being smart back then. So I went back to the kitchen. My whole day was busy, and I had a lot of orders and happy customers. Most of them asked me to open my own bakery. It was not a bad idea. I could establish my business, but how? In fact, their supportive reviews just made me what I became later. But at the time, there was no one to help me. My siblings had their studies to focus on, and Dad was literally acting so immature. Even if I wanted to, I could not have done it. With the passage of time, I loved my decision to start that online business, and I got more income, which I saved for future emergencies, and from my salary, I could not save anything. No matter what happened, I was not going to give the money to Dad, and that for drinking and gambling. I'm not that stupid, at least. The day passed until late at night. I was done with the orders. My dad came in again, and guess what? Asked me for money. That was not going to stop, and I told him that I knew he's been stealing from my bag and that I was not giving him any, but he started shouting and asking, demanding for money. I had no other option at all. After all the drama he did, I surrendered. I gave him money and agreed to buy gifts for everyone without cutting his allowance, and in addition to this, I also promised to throw a Christmas party after so many years. Dad was surprised and happy, and he said that he would invite his new friends to the party as well. But I knew what was going to happen, and his happiness was going to be short-lived. Everyone knew what kind of friends he had, all useless drunks. His previous friends abandoned him as they didn't want to hang out with an alcoholic, so then the friends he made were just like him, not working, not doing anything with their lives. I'll update you guys soon enough. Update number 5. Everything went back to normal after I decided to invite everyone to the party. I made all the arrangements, but there was a surprise for my father, and it was revenge for everything he did. It was going to be fun, too. He thought that he would just, win by behaving that way. That was not going to happen. I did give him the illusion that everything was happening according to his wish and happiness, but actually it was all a disguise. I was smart, wasn't I? Well, the party began. All my cousins were there, and most of all were my dad's mannerless friends. He was telling them how he was throwing them such a great party, and that he was so rich and he had a huge home. All his friends seemed impressed by his house and the lavish party. I hated his friends. It was as if they all wanted unlimited complimentary wine and food, and they all had fun. And then my dad's smiling face lost all of its color when he saw Grandpa entering the party. The most awaited entry, of course. My fun had just begun. Yes, that was my plan. I'd invited Grandpa to the party and told him everything that was going on. I told him how he lost his job. After that, I had to take all the financial and domestic responsibilities, and he was furious. He asked me why I did not contact him sooner, and he said that he would come and handle the situation his way, and that I needed not to worry. He was sorry for what I had to go through, and he never knew all of this was happening. He said that he had expected my dad to act more mature after he lost, we lost Mom. But he was disappointed. He said that he would teach Dad a lesson for life, and then there he was, holding his stick in his hand, and Dad was standing nervously as if he could read Grandpa's expression. Without wasting a second, Grandpa started hitting my dad with a stick. It was such an embarrassing moment for Dad, and all his friends were standing right there, and my cousins too, and everybody was laughing at him, but not explicitly, as nobody wanted to be beaten, just like him. Grandpa did look really angry, and when he was done beating him, he asked Dad why he did that to his children. He said that after our mother's death, he was responsible for everything, not me. He also said that he was not expecting such immature reactions from Dad. The party's over. Grandpa told everybody to leave, and then we were left, and he forbade Dad to take money from me and kicked him out. He said that no one needed him there anymore, and that he was useless, and he never helped in times of need, so he was not wanting around here anymore. My dad begged Grandpa to spare him. He requested not to kick him out as he was under a heavy debt and wanted our help to pay it back, otherwise he would have gone to jail. Grandpa did not seem to care. He was done with him, and he was a man of great morals, so he considered it as punishment for what he's done. Still, my dad kept requesting him to help him and not let him be alone. He said that being a father, Grandpa should be helping him. Grandpa asked him a straightforward question. Didn't he have responsibilities as well, being a father, to help his children? Why did he not realize it when his help was needed? And to that, Dad had no answer. Obviously, he didn't care. He showed his selfishness and, his side that he had when he was needed. Upon constant request, Grandpa finally came to a solution. He said that he would pay all of the debt that Dad had if my dad sold his house and transferred it to my name, as I've been the sole breadwinner of the family. I knew that he would never, ever transfer this house to me because the debt thing seemed so dramatic, but I was deeply shocked when he agreed. It means he really was in debt, and Grandpa agreed to it too. Update number 6. Later, the house was transferred to me, and Dad did not live with us again till his debts were cleared. But one day, he came back. It was a thunderous night when I heard the doorbell ringing. I went to see who it was and found him standing there crying, and he said that he was very sorry for what he did and that I should take him back, as he was my father. Well, I was not a kid anymore. I was mature enough to, understand everything, what he was trying to do, but then he started recalling all the good memories of my childhood, how he loved me so much and how he lived so happily with Mom, and, well, he then blackmailed me by saying that Mom would not be happy to see me doing this to him. Why did he not think this while doing the same to us? Would Mom be happy to see him leaving us helpless? But there was no use of the convo. I said that I was not going to let the torture enter our peaceful lives again. But then, from the pretension of a very sweet, loving dad, he was back to his true colors. He said that I should not think of myself as the owner of this house and that I was not a winner. He in fact blamed me for what happened to him, but he said that I deliberately invited Grandpa so that he would take everything from him and give it to me. He added that I was a greedy woman, and I brought misery to my father, and according to him it was a mutual plan of Grandpa and I to make him miserable, as Grandpa just paid half of his debt, and then he was still left to pay the remaining. Grandpa knew him inside and out, and that's why he tricked him. My dad wanted me to take him back as he transferred the house to me because he thought that I would keep him back. I was never going to do that and stated that to him clearly. I asked him to never show up again, and I closed the door on him. Forever. Final mini update. With my grandfather's support, I was able to establish my own business in town. As I owned a huge house, there was ample space to make a bakery, so I opened my home and made a own home-based bakery, which was open to customers too. It was designed in a way that it had an outside opening on the street, and it also had an inside connection too. So I could easily manage it. I hired 2 helpers with me as it was a growing business and was not possible to handle alone. I had to quit my job too, and within no time, my bakery became one of the most famous bakeries in town. And we did have a happy life again. We never heard from Dad again, and Grandfather did not know where he even went. I'd say the best part is that Grandpa started living with us. And where we were a small, happy family, I think I did right, as he deserved it. He could have acted differently, but it was what he chose. Story 6th. Where do I start with this? I always knew all my mother-in-law's craps would eventually build up to some huge giant event that would see everyone turn on her. She was just the type of person who kept up with the microaggressions. It was why we kept our distance from her in the first place. I'll start by saying that I grew up with working-class parents who eventually worked their way up to the middle class. When we moved into a suburban neighborhood, I was about 8 years old. There were only about 2 other POC families. This mattered to my parents because we were black. Everyone else in the neighborhood was white. But to our relief, everyone accepted us with open arms, and I spent the next few years going to school and getting great grades. When I was getting ready to enter high school, it was suggested I skip 2 grades because they felt the material would be more challenging for me. While I was nervous to just automatically skip 2 grades, I realized I wanted to do it. I loved to learn and did not want to coast through the 9th and 10th grades when I could go straight to junior year. My parents weren't on board right away. It took some convincing, but eventually they agreed to let me start high school in the 11th grade. It was there that I met Thomas. He was 2 years older than me, but since I was in his grade, we were in the same classes. Where I was on the quiet side, he was quite outgoing. Yet they do say opposites attract, and after a group project, we started hanging out more and more. Eventually, we started dating. The 2 of us did not tell our parents until half a year into the relationship. My parents were weary because of the age difference, but decided to give Thomas a chance. Now, Thomas's father was very welcoming and embraced me into the family, but his mother, not so much. Jackie did not like me from the get-go. It wasn't my age. Through our conversations, I was able to figure out she disliked me because I was black. She didn't come right out and say it or anything like that. It was through subtle, ignorant comments she made towards me that signified Jackie did not like me because of my skin. However, Jackie wasn't going to get rid of me that easily. I cared for Thomas and wanted to be with him. Even though we were young, we knew that we wanted each other. The two of us were dating when we graduated high school, and we decided that we wanted to go to school. I wanted to work with numbers, which was why I figured a bachelor's degree in accounting would be the best option for me. Thomas went to a trade school, learning a trade that would give him a very good job along with benefits inside the future. The school I went to was local, so Thomas and I did not have to shift to a long-distance relationship, and we continued to date, and in my final year of college, when I was 19 and Thomas was 21, I discovered I was pregnant. Thomas and I already knew that we wanted to get married and have kids shortly. This was a little too soon, and when I first found out, I was terrified. However, after we talked about it, we first decided to elope and go forward with the pregnancy. I was nervous about telling my parents, but they were thrilled. My now father-in-law was also happy, but I'll say my mother-in-law, she put on her fake little smile. Though I knew she was less than pleased with the news. A part of me figured Jackie always hoped that dating me was a phase and Thomas would eventually start dating, quote, the right kind of girl. The two of us eventually did have a wedding ceremony, so all of our parents could attend. It was a small affair with just family and friends in the backyard of Thomas's aunt's house. She had a big backyard, so it was the perfect setting to have the ceremony and an after party. Even though we were already married, and mother-in-law had to accept it, she acted up at the wedding. My mother-in-law wore a dress that was off-white, as she said and made little comments. I swear at one point she even tried to dump wine on my dress, but decided against it at the last second. I might have imagined it, but I would not put it past my mother-in-law to do that to me. She wanted to do whatever she could to make my life as unforgettable as possible, because her son was not marrying a white type of girl. No, this wasn't a slip-up. I meant what I said there. She wanted him to marry a white girl. That was the right girl for Thomas, not me, according to her. With us getting married and having kids, I was tied to Thomas's life and technically her life forever. At least regarding the pregnancy, I was. Something could have happened between Thomas and me, and we could have ended up getting a divorce. I mean, life happens. Nobody can predict the future. However, when you have children, you're tied to the other person you had the children with for the rest of your days. Jackie was not happy about that at all, but she dealt with it in her own little way. Meaning Jackie kept up with her comments. They were racist when you read between the lines, but she never outright said anything that could be perceived as racist. The first time she did was when the twins were getting close to their due date. I overheard Jackie talking to my husband Thomas about how dark the kids might actually turn out to be. Thomas shut it down right away, and he told his mother that she was being ignorant and said another comment like, that would see her not being a part of her grandchildren's lives for a while. The twins ended up coming into the world about a week after my graduation. I was so grateful I was able to graduate before having the twins because I wanted to walk across the stage to get my degree. It wasn't the easiest labor. After the kids were born, the twins had to stay in the hospital for a little while because they were small. While they were in the hospital, Thomas and I went back to his grandmother's house, where we had been staying since it was discovered that we were pregnant. She had graciously offered to let us stay there a few months back, and Thomas's paternal grandmother wanted us to be able to save up while not having to worry about having a place to stay. It was such a nice offer. Thomas and I accepted right away. Thomas's grandmother was exactly like her son, my father-in-law. She was so sweet and accepting, sometimes I wondered why father-in-law and mother-in-law were even married. There were rumors that it was mostly because she ended up pregnant, but I wasn't going to poke around in the past when it was important to focus on the future. Whatever the reason, father-in-law stayed with mother-in-law and did seem to care about her. When she made these comments, he would just brush her off or ignore her. He would attempt to give the kids extra love so it would not come off like their grandmother held some prejudice towards them. I appreciated it. But the best way to shield the kids was to keep them away from their grandma. From the start, we did let Jackie interact with the twins a bit. Alexi and Lex loved both pair of grandparents, and we were careful to always be present when Jackie was with the twins because the last thing I wanted was a racist issue or some crap to come out of her mouth. They would eventually come to realize that people were going to judge them for the color of their skin. Unfortunately, you tended to learn this at an early age, and I didn't want my kids to have to learn this from their own grandmother, of all people. Once my kids were old enough, I began to see how bright they really were. They were showing signs that they were very young, of course, but once they started school, it became crystal clear. By the time the kids were starting preschool, I had a distant relationship with my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law had started babysitting my niece's daughter, who she treated as her granddaughter. It was only a temporary thing, but she gushed over her, and father-in-law loved the niece, but thought mother-in-law was overstepping her boundaries. Why gush over her great niece when she had two perfectly lovely grandchildren of her own? Well, that great niece was white, unlike my children. Alexi and Lex were biracial, but they did look more like me than their father. I know it made mother-in-law mad to no end, so if she wanted to ignore my kids, I was fine ignoring her. This wasn't to say she didn't spend time with my kids, though. Well, Jackie did, but she hated that she could not be alone with them. Probably to influence them with whatever racist bullcrap she wanted to utter into their ears. At least Alexi and Lex had my parents. They adored their grandkids and spoiled them to no end. I knew that when I got with Thomas and my mother-in-law, she was not going to make it easy for us. This was just a fact, and the reason why I stuck it with is because I loved my husband and the family that we've made. It would be by no means easy. Thomas sometimes felt torn between me and his mother, but when it came down to it, he chose me. The two of us had a family together. Why wouldn't he defend me? The older the kids got, the more difficult it was to explain the strained relationship. When they turned 5, my mother-in-law suddenly got a new interest in them, but this was because her great niece was now in school full-time. Her babysitting services were not needed. Alexi and Lex did seem happy their grandmother was suddenly interested in them. I didn't think my mother-in-law had changed, but father-in-law was always with her while she saw after the kids, so you know what? I wasn't really worried. My father-in-law would never let anything happen to my kids. He loved those children more than anything, and once the kids were there in the 3rd grade, we ended up considering putting them in a gifted school. The principal even recommended it. I talked it over with my husband, and eventually we decided it was a good idea for them to go to the gifted school. They will start the next school year. So let's jump ahead 2 grades, and it's been the best thing I've ever done. So my kids being able to get this gifted school was going to be great for them. Like my parents, Thomas was a little hesitant, but the more we talked about it, the more he realized it was a great idea. Watching the kids grow was amazing, but also made me a little sad because it seemed to be happening so fast. During their 8th year, they were doing even better in school. I would not be surprised if they skipped a grade or 2 like I did. We didn't tell anyone yet that the kids were going to a gifted school, but planned to during the holiday season. The reason I'm posting this is unfortunately not to brag about my kids, but because of what my mother-in-law ended up doing this year during Christmas. When you're in the Christmas season, you expect everything to be going lovely and about family. My mother-in-law had not done anything especially bad, so I had no reason to think something was going to happen. It started as a normal day. Mother-in-law and father-in-law were supposed to come over for Christmas Eve with some presents, and they would open the in-laws' presents, spend time with them, and then go home. How could anyone think that anything was going to end up going wrong? When they got there, I noticed that they weren't having any gifts. I was a little puzzled, but decided not to say anything about it. They might just be in the car or something. So we chatted in the hallway and then had the dinner that I prepared. The presents left my mind, and it wasn't until after dinner when the kids started excitedly asking about their gifts that I realized they still hadn't gotten out the presents. I was very confused because I didn't get why they hadn't brought the presents. We decided to give the kids cash this year, father-in-law said quickly, cutting off mother-in-law who was about to explain. Well, I frowned and said, well, that's fine, then they can pick out what they want at least. It was strange for them to go this route, but I figured maybe there was some mishap at the last minute, so the in-laws decided just to give us cash. Usually you give cash to older kids, but like I said, I was willing to roll with it. When it came down to it, I was pretty easygoing and willing to accept things for how they were. Yes, mother-in-law added. And there's something more where that came from. We just came into some money because my estranged father left me with some in his will. I remember hearing about that, but did not really understand what this had to do with giving money for a Christmas gift. Certainly they had the money to purchase actual gifts, tangible gifts for the children. Well, I appreciate it, but we're fine, I reassured her. By now, we all had our single-family home. It was perfect for us, and we were not in really a lot of debt. I mean, I got a scholarship, so I didn't have student loan debts or anything. Yes, well, Alexi and Lex are going to need us to contribute as much as we can so they don't end up as one of those hoodlums. The moment this came out of my mother-in-law's mouth, my soul absolutely left my body. Thomas came into the room to ask why I looked like I saw a ghost. I told Thomas what mother-in-law said, and you know what? She admitted it. Father-in-law looked ashamed, and he explained that he was sorry for what she had said. I told him it's fine, but they both have to leave. Mother-in-law starts saying she didn't mean anything by it, and she just wanted to make sure her grandbabies did not turn out like some of my family members. I was seconds from cursing her out, but Thomas jumped in and told him that they had to leave, so they left. Thank goodness the kids didn't hear anything. This was Christmas. They were supposed to have a nice, loving holiday with their grandparents, and it turned into a crap show. It wasn't fair. Thomas and I tried to make sure the rest of the day was good for Lex and Alexi. They were told that their grandparents were sick and had to go rest, and because they're kids, they accepted it without giving it much thought. I don't know what's going to happen with my in-laws now, but I can tell you it's not going to go back to how it was. Update number 1. We did not speak to mother-in-law or father-in-law until the day after Christmas. Thomas said that he was going to go over to their house to speak with them and asked if I wanted to go. I told him that I also wanted to go because I had a few things to get off my chest. When we get there, father-in-law was the one to open the door. He apologized right away and said mother-in-law was out of line. I asked where she was, and he said that she would be home soon, and while we waited, Thomas told his father the good news about the kids. They're going to a gifted school because of how well that they're doing academically, and he didn't really look shocked and said that he figured the kids would go far. The reason for this, they had their mother's smarts. I didn't think he was trying to butter me up. I genuinely think he meant it. Around this time, mother-in-law came scrolling back in, and she looked shocked to see us. Thomas started first, saying that she needs to apologize for what she had said and done. But Jackie, being Jackie, refused. Why apologize when she's just trying to make sure her grandbabies did not become another statistic? If they did not put up the money, then there's no way those kids could make it. Intelligence isn't their point. All of us knew what she was saying, and before either of us could say something, father-in-law suddenly burst out laughing. Jackie, don't be stupid. Alexi and Lex just got into a gifted school. Those kids aren't going to need any help from us. Do you know why? Because they're smart as hell. My mother-in-law starts shrieking and then stormed out, and I burst out in laughter too. Despite myself, it was nice to see my father-in-law defend us, but I never thought he would defend us in such a manner. The two of us stayed there a little longer just to talk with our father-in-law. Eventually, we left and headed back home, feeling a lot better than I had since the confrontation on Christmas Eve. Let Jackie feel completely stupid. She was the one who let her racism get to her, so she had no one to blame but herself. Update number 2. It's been about 2 weeks since the whole blow-up at Christmas happened, and if you don't recall what happened, my mother-in-law assumed her half-black grandkids were going to end up as hoodlums because of my heritage. We ended up confronting them the day after Christmas, and while we waited for mother-in-law, we told father-in-law the kids were enrolling in a gifted school. When mother-in-law came in, we told her after she doubled down and refused to apologize. Father-in-law laughed at her for her stupidity, and the two of us left after that and have not seen mother-in-law since. However, father-in-law has come by and kept in frequent contact with us. One night he showed up, a suitcase in hand. I was surprised and asked him what's wrong. Mother-in-law and father-in-law got into a fight about how mother-in-law treated the kids. He said that he can no longer take how she treated Alexi and Lex. They were her grandbabies. She still should not hold that racist attitude. It was a huge fight that ended up with father-in-law saying that he needed a few days away from her. This was why he came here. I wondered why he did not go stay with his mother, but figured he would rather be surrounded by his son and grandkids. Thomas and I talked it over, deciding that we would let him stay. He needs his family right now. Mother-in-law had to be raging over this. I did not receive any calls or texts from her, much to my relief at least. But the silence was also a little concerning because this woman was never very quiet. She loved to blast her business to anyone who listened, including online. And after about 2 days, mother-in-law finally called father-in-law and asked when he was going to come home. He asked her if she was going to realize that how she had been acting for the past year was not good. It was racist behavior and Jackie needed to apologize for it. If you think that mother-in-law did not play ball, you're right. She told him that some differences were just built into people. Certain races were better at some things and there was not much you could do about it. This was probably the most explicit racist thing my mother-in-law had ever said. It's just so blatant. How did she not think she did anything wrong? I just knew that now I was done trying to have some sort of relationship with her. Thomas was done too. We discussed it the other day and decided his mother was just not going to be in our lives anymore. It seemed like father-in-law was reconsidering his marriage as well. At least it appeared that way. I had no idea if he was considering divorce, and he might be holding out hope that he might be able to get through to Jackie somehow. It was pointless, but that was his wife. So I stayed quiet about it because I didn't want to make father-in-law too upset right now. Like I said, the ball is in mother-in-law's court. I doubt she's going to rein in her comments anyways, and have a feeling that she might even get worse with her racist behavior. Update number 3. Hey guys, father-in-law's still with us. It's been about 3 weeks since he moved into the spare room, and honestly, it's been nice having him around. The kids are thrilled at their granddad. He wakes them up, and every day they come home together from school. He's been a huge help to us as well, and both of us work outside of the home, and it gives my parents a break from having to pick up the kids all the time. Father-in-law's retired, so he has a lot of free time than my parents, who are both still working. Not to say my parents still won't see the kids, it just gives them some more free time. It was around the 4th week since father-in-law came to stay with us when mother-in-law decided to do her most racist action yet. She had the balls to go on Facebook and start ranting about her dirty daughter-in-law. Then she brought up my kids, who were also sullied because of their mom apparently. Obviously, I'm leaving out a lot of colorful phrases that my mother-in-law used. She also put a lot of slurs into the post, much to my shock. Thomas was the one who brought it to my attention. He got a message from one of his cousins on Facebook who says it's important he checks out his recent post from his mom. I cannot believe what I was seeing. Naturally, I reported the post, but not before letting father-in-law see it. It's difficult to do this because I think a part of him was still holding out hope that his wife might just see the error in her ways. With this post, it's crystal clear Jackie was never going to see the error of her ways. It wasn't long after that my father-in-law said he's going to start looking into a divorce. Thomas and I were both shocked. I mean, look, this man always seemed to stand by his wife and just hope for the best. Even if they married because of a pregnancy, which was his wife, I get it. Privately, I told Thomas that it's about time that his father got his head on straight and left mother-in-law for good. This was only going to increase in her erratic behavior. I thank God that my kids were very young and were not on social media. They would not be exposed to my mother-in-law's racist behavior and never feel like they were less than me. Those kids were as soon as any other kid they passed on the street, saw at school, or spoke with. One day, they would ask questions about why grandfather was no longer with grandma. They would ask also why grandma did not come around as much anymore. These were important questions, and Thomas and I were going to have to answer. I was fully prepared to answer them once they were old enough. For now, they could at least remain in ignorant bliss.
Story 7th.
I generally talk about things that are completely different to this post, but I really want to let this out. I'm going to share my recent traumatizing family experience, and I would love to hear people's point of view on this. All of you women out there have been complaining about how their husband's family is so weird. I've never experienced that until now. I really want to talk about my sister-in-law, Elizabeth, and the criminally wrong things that she's done. She is greed personified, and my husband's family has always been amazing and extremely supportive. My mother-in-law has always been a friend to me and has never been snobbish. After she's died, we've been close to my father-in-law, and he's literally raised my son, and my son just can't live without him. I just don't see why my sister-in-law is the way that she is. My father-in-law, Richard, he's a self-made man of principles. Although he was rather the orthodox or traditional belief type, he's a very righteous man. He imparted his values to my husband Charlie, but his younger daughter is quite the opposite. She wants to live this luxurious lifestyle, but doesn't want to work hard for it. I recently found out that she can go to an extreme length for money, and to get her way, and honestly, I feel sad for my father-in-law. Elizabeth married a French man, Etienne, against her father's wishes. Richard disowned her and forbid her to come back. This couple then had a daughter, Geraldine. Elizabeth came home after a few years with Geraldine and hoped that Richard would forgive her. Richard refused to forgive her and told her to leave. In all the years, Elizabeth only came to attend her mother's funeral and just wanted her jewels. Richard outed her for her selfishness, and last Christmas Eve, Elizabeth showed up at Richard's doorstep with her teenage daughter. Devastated and in tears, unfortunately, Etienne had passed away in an accident, leaving Geraldine and Elizabeth with no one. Richard could not see his daughter in that state and took her in, especially taking pity for his granddaughter, who had lost her beloved father. Elizabeth was set to an all-girls boarding school. And, well, it was a family tradition. During her school days, she got into the wrong company. Her group of friends would not study and just waste their days doing nothing, passing their time. When Elizabeth came home, she firmly announced that she did not want to pursue further education. Richard disliked her choices but failed to teach her that her choices could have serious repercussions. Richard often tells me about Charlie and Elizabeth's childhood and regrets not paying more attention to Elizabeth. Charlie and I met through mutual friends, and after a relationship of 3 years, we got married. I was scrutinized by Richard when Charlie told my in-laws that we were marrying. He doubted whether I was perfect for Richard or not. Initially, I hated Richard, but I tried hard to win my in-laws' hearts. Richard eventually accepted me, and now we've got this unbreakable bond. Elizabeth and her friends only had one goal, and that was to find somebody rich, marry them, and then become a trophy wife. She was a freeloader in her parents' house, and all she did was shop, party, and sleep. Elizabeth got engaged shortly after I married into the family. She was engaged to a handsome young man who was the son of Richard's good friend. Before her wedding, Elizabeth insisted that she wanted to go to Paris for a trip and shop for her wedding there. Elizabeth's fiancé paid for the whole trip, and she took her friends with her too. On her trip, she met Etienne, and they had quite good time together in Paris. Elizabeth cheated on her fiancé with him and decided to call off her engagement. She was hell-bent on marrying Etienne instead. Elizabeth barely knew him and did not even know what she was getting into. Etienne came from a wealthy political family, but he was frivolous and wanted to enjoy life. He planned to eventually step into politics like his family, and he knew that he had easy access. Elizabeth was drawn to him, and the way he lived his carefree life, just blowing money like it meant nothing to him. He wasn't like Richard or her then fiancé. He wasn't strict. He wasn't stingy. He was well educated, but he wasn't the kind of guy Richard would like. Just like Elizabeth, he was non-ambitious. Richard did his research and found that his family was corrupt and involved in malpractice in the government. Etienne did not have anything to do with it, though, but Richard did not want Elizabeth to marry into the family. He was furious at the humiliation that he had to face because Elizabeth broke off the engagement and cheated. Richard opposed their relationship, and Elizabeth led her family and moved to France with Etienne. She thought she would be able to live a life surrounded by luxury, but things did not turn out quite the way she wanted. After she got married to Etienne, his family sidelined her because she was American. They didn't like her. Nevertheless, she did not care because she had access to the family's money. The couple welcomed a baby girl into their lives soon after they got married in a grand ceremony in France. She didn't even try to invite my in-laws to her wedding. They would not have gone anyways, and Etienne decided that he did not want to join politics and wanted to be a chef instead. He had secretly been pursuing education for it and dreamt of opening his own restaurant. He expected his father to pay for his dream, but they disapproved of his choice of profession. Etienne moved out of the apartment that was given to him by his father with Elizabeth and his baby. Etienne had to start from scratch, and although he proved Elizabeth's basic needs, it was not the same luxurious life with no financial issues. Well, Elizabeth grew insecure that Etienne would never be able to earn the kind of money she wanted to live her life with. She would constantly nag him to go back to his family, join politics so their lifestyle could be better. Etienne was adamant about pursuing his dream. And now, it's hard for Elizabeth to leave because she was dependent on him and even had his child. She grew more insecure when Etienne's parents died and left everything to his sisters out of anger for Etienne. Elizabeth knew that she had to do something. She came home when Geraldine was about 5 years old. I remember it was very surprising for us, and my mother-in-law was completely over the moon. Even though Charlie wasn't very pleased, it was my son Kieran's 5th birthday party, and it was arranged by my mother-in-law. Richard was not home because he had to go on an urgent work-related trip. Kieran and Geraldine got along well, and he insisted that he stays at his grandmother's house to play with her. Elizabeth came home with the intention of being forgiven by her parents, and my mother-in-law was ready to forgive her. But when Richard came home 2 days later, he was furious upon seeing her, but warmed up to his granddaughter. She realized at that time that Geraldine was the key to winning his heart. She begged for forgiveness for the sake of Geraldine, but he sternly asked her to leave. My mother-in-law, tried to convince Richard to forgive her, but he would not agree. My husband, Charlie, broke ties too because the person that she had engaged to was also Charlie's good friends, and he was depressed after she broke off the engagement. My mother-in-law died of cancer a few years later, and I called Elizabeth after my mother-in-law died. Etienne and Elizabeth attended the funeral. They stayed at a hotel, but Elizabeth came home after the ceremony. She went straight to her parents' bedroom, taking advantage of the fact that Richard was warming up to her. She opened her mother's safe and expressed a desire to take her mom's jewelry. It had not even been a week since she died, and her act felt wrong. Richard called her greedy and he condemned her. He told her that she would not be receiving any of his wife's jewelry and that she could leave and never show her face again. Elizabeth was enraged and she left. We could clearly see that all Elizabeth was interested in was the money, and she didn't care much about the family. I hope I've given you guys an idea of what went down in our family. Now, we didn't hear much from her until a few months ago. Richard had suffered a heart attack and he has not been the same since. He's grown weak and frail, and we've been trying to tell him otherwise, but he thought this end was coming, so he decided to write a will. We had all gathered for Christmas at his home and were surprised when we opened up the door to Elizabeth at the doorstep. We were confused because she was pale and she was crying so much. She brought Geraldine along with her too, and we took her in and asked what the matter was, and she revealed to us how Etienne had died unexpectedly in a car crash. He recently put all of his money into a new restaurant that made a huge loss. He had left a lot of debt in Elizabeth's name, and they were being troubled by debt collectors. Elizabeth described that she's unable to support her young daughter who wants to go to university. Paris is a very expensive city, and she can't afford to live there with no support. Elizabeth told us she is not fully recovered from the loss of her husband, but is burdened by debt and has to support her young daughter. We were moved by her story, and we were in complete tears. We were devastated and saddened by the loss of Etienne. Richard lauded Etienne for leaving his corrupt family and making a good man out of himself. He regrets not reaching out to him and forgiving him sooner. He promised that he would support Geraldine and take care of her. Richard thought Elizabeth and Geraldine would stay with them in the U.S., but Geraldine wanted to pursue her education in France because she thought that she would struggle in the U.S. due to her weak English. They wanted to go back to France immediately. They expected Richard to send them monthly expenses, but Richard wanted them to stay for the holidays. They were hesitant to stay, but Richard had his way of getting his way. When my mother-in-law passed away, we decided to move to the same neighborhood as Richard. Kirion and Richard shared a tight bond, and Richard would be at ours for dinner almost every day. And around the holidays, we would mostly be celebrating Christmas at his house, and we would be around all day and then go home just to sleep. We decided to continue the tradition, but this time Geraldine and Elizabeth were around. Well, I could not help but notice that Geraldine really tried to push herself in front of Richard just to go ahead and try to impress him. And Elizabeth was encouraging her. I didn't really mind her efforts to get closer to Richard, but I found it weird that Geraldine was constantly trying to prove that she was better than Kieran. Geraldine and Elizabeth visited our house too. I noticed that Geraldine had sneakily put some of my makeup in her bag. I didn't want to accuse her of being a thief, but people can do strange things because of trauma. I tried to talk with Elizabeth and told her that she should have Geraldine see a therapist. She took things in a completely different route and threw a huge tantrum, telling Richard and Charlie that I was accusing her daughter of stealing. I thought Richard would understand, but things between us grew bitter after that. Geraldine had hidden the stuff that she had stolen somehow, and I could not prove that I was right. Well, Elizabeth thought that she was entitled to order us all around. Richard and Charlie listened to her, but I wasn't having it. She would constantly throw tantrums if things weren't her way, and she had not brought much luggage, so she made Richard buy a whole wardrobe full of clothes for her and Geraldine. I had to rush to buy last-minute Christmas gifts for them. She told me she didn't like them on my face when Richard was not around and proceeded to throw them in the bin. Geraldine would misbehave with everyone, and Charlie and I were starting to get sick of her behavior. When we called her out, she starts to cry about the bad phase that she was going through because her father died. Elizabeth called us insensitive, and it was funny that both of them were trying to put on a face in front of Richard and would make us look like the bad people in front of him. Charlie explained to me that it was an old habit of hers. She had always thought that her parents were inclined towards Charlie more, and she would constantly try to show him in a bad light, just to prove that she was better. Charlie brushed off her awful behavior. I'd started to get annoyed by Elizabeth and wanted her to leave. She had somehow damaged the bond Richard and I have been creating with misunderstandings. She purposely put pecans in my food, knowing full well that Richard was allergic. Richard had to be rushed to the hospital, and when we came home, Charlie lashed out at me. They all blamed me for ruining New Year's. And Richard got mad at me, and Elizabeth then admitted to being the one putting pecans in the food I made. She laughed at me, saying that nobody would believe me. At this point, I could not believe that she would be so petty that she would hurt her own father. I was really upset after that and was crying in the corner. Kieran came to console me and told me that he was sure that the person with us was not Geraldine but someone else. I told him that whatever he was saying was utter nonsense, and he was adamant about his observation. I was already in a bad mood, so I got mad at him, told him to go away. I didn't have time for this. The next day, Richard had a word with me and told me that he had forgiven me. He told me to try to get along with Elizabeth. Elizabeth had betrayed me in such a way that Richard thought I was bothered by her presence. I wasn't really bothered before. I was happy to see her, but then I was because of her petty, entitled behavior. I didn't really want to explain myself because I knew it would cause issues. I wanted to try to regain his trust again. At that point, I just knew that blood is thicker than water, and I felt like he would not listen to me over his own daughter. Elizabeth starts going out with her friends, leaving Geraldine to stay at home with Richard. We would have dinner at Richard's since Elizabeth and Geraldine came. Elizabeth would come home late at night, after being out with her friends the whole day. Many of our relatives came over to see Geraldine and Elizabeth. Charlie's aunt pointed out that Geraldine's eye color was different, and that she was wearing lenses. She had visited France a few years ago and told me that she had changed her appearance a lot. I could tell that Geraldine wasn't wearing lenses. I looked back at an album that had a picture of Kirian and Geraldine from when she visited as a child. Geraldine's eyes were blue. I know that it's not common for eye colors to change. I was suspicious of Geraldine. I knew that Etienne's birthday was coming up, so I went over to talk to her about a memory from one of his birthdays. She had no clue about the date of his birthday, so I quizzed her and asked her about her grandfather and her aunt, but she had no clue about them either. It seemed rather odd. I remembered what Kirion told me, but insisted of talking to anyone I wanted just to make sure of it. I decided to pursue what Kirion told me. I tried to stalk the family on social media. I didn't find any of their accounts on any platform, and it was strange for a 16-year-old not to have an Instagram account, even if they lived in France. Instead, I tried to stalk Etienne's family for clues. They were all public figures, and most of them had active social media accounts with lots of followers. I came across Etienne's sister's account and was flabbergasted at what I had discovered. His sister had actually posted about Etienne's death, and guess what? Geraldine had died too. The two were traveling home from Geraldine's school and died in a tragic car accident. I was confused at first and thought it was wrong because I had to use a translator to translate it from French to English, and I read a news article about it and confirmed that Geraldine was in fact dead, along with Etienne. I need answers. So I asked my cousin, who's studying architecture in France, to find out more about it. I also sent her a picture of Geraldine that was in front of me, and my cousin asked the neighbors and friends, who revealed that Etienne and Elizabeth argued a lot over money. She told everyone that she was a journalist who was covering their death. The poor woman helped me a lot by going around asking people. They revealed that Elizabeth had changed over the years. She wasn't happy with the lack of luxury in their household. Elizabeth even refused to adjust and wanted him to join politics. She also told me that the girl who's acting like Geraldine is actually Michelle. Michelle is actually Elizabeth's friend's daughter. Michelle's mom told my cousin that she went on a trip to the US with Elizabeth, and clearly they had other motives. I thanked my cousin and asked her to keep me updated about it. So, I took printouts of all the news articles I could find on the internet, of all Etienne's sister's postings, and I was about to go and tell Richard and Charlie the truth. But Elizabeth stopped me because she found out that my cousin had been asking around. A fight ensued between us at Richard's house, and it got physical afterward, too. Elizabeth tried to hurt me. I was outnumbered by Michelle and Elizabeth, and they pushed me. I think they were trying to knock me out or something. But Richard arrived home and saw them trying to hit me, and Richard demanded an explanation. I told him the truth. At first he would not believe me, but I showed him all the evidence. Richard quizzed Michelle to confirm that she was not Geraldine. Richard was shocked at his own daughter's betrayal and the loss of his granddaughter. He was at a loss for words for quite a while. Charlie had to rush home to handle the situation, and Richard threw Elizabeth out along with Michelle. He ordered her to never show their face here again. Elizabeth begged and cried, saying that she was alone and that she only did this to get her family back. Richard told her that it wasn't for family, but it was for money. Oh, if only she had been honest and told him the truth, things would have been better for her. Elizabeth went to live at her good friend's house until she could find something for her own. She somehow managed to arrange the money to send Michelle back to Paris because Michelle wanted to leave. Richard is now heartbroken. Kirion saying, "I told you so," and I did apologize to not listen to him. I'm trying to fix things at home, but Richard and Charlie are very upset. Things have changed and have become very quiet lately. I hope everything resolves soon. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Toodles for now. Update number 1. Hey guys. A lot of you have been asking what happened to Elizabeth and how Richard has been. I decided to write this update. Richard wanted to forget about it and move on, but I encouraged him to teach her a lesson. I wanted revenge too, for the way she tried to hurt me and create misunderstandings between me and my family. I fueled the fire and tried to convince Richard to sue her for what she did. I added that it was the only way she would realize that what she did was wrong. Richard even seemed convinced. He legally sued her for committing fraud and causing him emotional distress at a very young age. and since he had heart issues, it could have had a serious repercussion on him, as well for the theft, since she took money from him under false pretense. We later found out after doing research that there was no debt at all. She was shocked that he sued her and called him. She hired a lawyer who was, I guess I can say, stupid. He argued that Richard had disowned her and left her with no choice. Richard won the case because her argument was invalid and because parents have full rights to disown their own kid. Richard had medical evidence that Elizabeth's deceit had made him ill. They made her give compensation to Richard for emotional distress, that she's caused him, and told her that she had 6 months to compensate him as well as pay back the money that she took him for lying. Richard won the case and Elizabeth was not happy. She went to Richard's house drunk as a skunk and started screaming that he's a bad father. The neighbors called the police and she was liable to pay a fine. Elizabeth's friend kicked her out because she could not keep her in the household any longer. She was living at her house like a complete freeloader. She had the audacity to go back to Richard to beg to let her stay. Obviously, Richard refused, and she had to sleep on the streets with her luggage on a cold, cold night. The next day, she found herself a job, and she continued to live on the streets until she could arrange a deposit for a cramped-up apartment, which had a small kitchen in the living room and was filled with termites and bed bugs. She finally got that luxurious life that she wanted. Now, Elizabeth has to do something she never wanted to do in her whole life. Work hard for herself. She could have done it in the first place, but now she has to make a living for herself and pay the people she borrowed money from, and other compensations. I knew karma would hit her one day, but I got impatient. I'm so happy Richard decided to sue her. I love seeing where she's at now. Richard and Charlie don't really talk about her anymore. She does come often, sometimes, and tries to beg for forgiveness. She's called Richard so many times to ask him to waive the compensation, and Richard just won't budge. He's had his moments of weakness, but in the end, he's still angry over what Elizabeth did. I hope it stays that way. That's all I have for now. Thank you for reading and commenting. Ciao! Final update. Hello. I know I haven't posted in a really long time, and I did not think I would be updating about Elizabeth more. Things have turned out in a such way that I needed to add this. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but to me, writing this down or typing it out makes me feel better. I feel it's disrespectful to talk about family to known people, but no one knows me or my family in real life, and gossiping about Elizabeth gives me some sort of satisfaction because you know what? I absolutely hate her. Because of that one holiday. She made me feel like my life was hell. Things have changed ever since, and my husband and father-in-law never recovered. Also, what kind of jerk do you have to be to make a fake daughter for your own father's money just after your husband and real daughter died? It clearly shows she doesn't care at all and only wants money. I have to reveal something really big though. Our beloved Richard passed away. The last few months have been really difficult for us as a family to cope with and his loss, and Elizabeth came to the funeral. It was hard for her to show her face to everyone at the funeral, and she blamed me for it, and told me that this would have never happened if I had not told Richard the truth. Later, she cried and put up a drama about how she was so sad because everybody she loved was dying. Everyone could clearly see that she just wanted to gain sympathy. A couple days later, everybody was called for his will to be read. Richard had written the will during the Christmas holidays when Elizabeth came home with Geraldine. Elizabeth had a share of his assets too, and much to her surprise, Richard changed his last will and testament later on. Elizabeth was not included. Well, Elizabeth had gotten nothing from him. Her face dropped and she threw all sorts of tantrums in front of everyone. Charlie's uncle said that she was being disrespectful to her late father, and they had her thrown out. Elizabeth was still liable to pay the compensation, but all the money would come to us since we inherited his wealth. Elizabeth took a flight to France to sell Etienne's apartment for money. She had not gone for so long because she had to pay a lot of people whose money she borrowed. She decided she would pay them back after selling his home. To her surprise, she was slammed with a legal notice on her face as soon as she got to Paris. Michelle had told her mom the truth, and her mom sued Elizabeth and accused her of kidnapping her daughter and using her daughter to extort money since she was a minor. It was a huge offense, and it all started with charges that she put against Elizabeth, and they were proven to be true. Michelle testified against her, and nothing could save her from going to prison. In the end, she got what she deserves: jail time. I don't feel bad for her at all. When she gets out, she'll have a really hard time because after Richard died, she just really has no one. I wish that she did not do all those things, and she's probably regretting her actions. I guess we won't be hearing much from her now, so for now, so long. Story 8. I'm Steve, a finance manager in one of the leading firms in the city, and everything was going perfectly. I had the perfect job and the perfect girl, until Emma decided to show up again in my life. Let's start from the very beginning when Emma stepped into my life. You see, Emma met me at one of my mother's business dinners 2 years ago, and she's the daughter of a well-known business tycoon who has various franchises all over the world and also exercises great power over the city. Who does not want to associate themselves with such a powerful man? My mother, being the highly ambitious and career-driven woman that she is, has shown key interest in his business dynamics. She wants to expand her estate further beyond the boundaries of the city, and a partnership with Emma's father would be the perfect opportunity to do this. So, when she introduced me to Emma that night, I knew it was not for me but for her. After all, her estate was her priority, and I was just a means to broaden it. At first, Emma seemed to be very much a guy's dream girl. The ideal body, the pretty face, the fashion sense of a model, and just the right mix of shy and flirty. She had lots of guys swooning over her. And even I was not immune to her charm. Since the first time I saw her, I've been drawn to the way that she carried herself. Emma also seemed to find me interesting, as she was quite curious to know about my life. We got to talking, and in no time, as both of us had a passion for the finance sector, so we did not even realize that we've spent the entire night conversing about all sorts of stuff. My mother was quite satisfied with my new acquaintance. Over the next few months, Emma and I developed a close relationship, and we were absolutely inseparable. We used to share all types of things, and be the family problems or career issues, you name it, I was accustomed to being alone, as my father had passed away when I was a little boy. My mother had always been busy with her estate, so for once it was good to have someone by my side. And when you spend so much time with a person, feelings are bound to creep in, but when you start feeling so strongly for someone, you also tend to ignore their shortcomings, like when I ignored the various incidents where Emma would lose her calm over absolutely nothing at all. So, 3 months into our friendship, I asked Emma to be my girlfriend. She could not have been happier, and she screamed yes. We told our families, and the happiest of us all was my mother, as she saw this as a chance to try to get close to Emma's father professionally so that he would partner with her firm. We had the dreamiest 2 months, I'm telling ya, as we were both head over heels and could not get enough of each other. We used to have great fun, but everything was going too fast, so a month into our dating, we moved in together. But then the actual issue started. Emma started to be overly possessive of me. She started checking my cell phone, keeping an eye on me, and would fight over the littlest, slightest things. Like why I sat next to a girl on the subway station. I mean, come on. The relationship started getting suffocating for me. I would not have any personal space for myself or even for my friends. She would not even let me and my best friend Robert hang out alone, as she would insist that she wanted to tag along. Eventually, we started fighting a lot, almost daily, and over time the argument started to get more aggressive. I found out that Emma had some serious temper issues, and she used to throw stuff around when we used to fight, and she even pushed me into the wall at times, but I ignored her temper and aggressive behavior for the first few times, as you seem to forgive the people that you love. But one day, All the lines were crossed when Emma threw a glass vase at me during a heated argument about why I should not respond to an email from a woman that I work with. The vase missed me by a mere 2 inches. Moreover, she acted as if it was me at fault. If I had not responded to the woman, she would not have been forced to throw the vase at me. I could not tolerate this any longer. So I told her that we need to break things off, and she was shattered when she heard this. She starts crying manically, throwing fits around and telling me that if I broke up with her, she would ensure that her father did not partner with my mother's estate. I could not believe that she would stoop to such low levels, so I just kept quiet. Once she calmed down a bit and regained her senses, she requested that I give her another try. But I was done with her selfish, egoistic behavior, and I cut her off altogether. I moved out the very next day and moved in with Robert, who was kind enough to offer me a place to crash for as long as I wanted. I did not talk to her at all. She tried to reach me through my friends, and when I did not respond, she talked to my mother about it. And what stunned me was that she weaved entirely a different story in front of my mother. She had told her that I had hit Emma during a heated argument, and she also showed her some fake bruises. Emma's father had told my mother that she should be grateful that his daughter was not pressing any charges against me. I could not believe that the girl I considered to be perfect would turn out to be an evil person. What bothered my mother even more was that this clash between me and Emma severed the chances of her signing a partnership contract with Emma's father, which she was so close to securing. I broke into a fight with my mother over the same. My mother was even more furious than Emma because she was worried about her estate. My mother asked me to mend things with Emma just so she could sign the contract, and I could not believe my mother would be so selfish to keep her business over her child. She said to me, and I quote, "All my life I've been working for you. Now it's your time to pay me back." And the realization hit me I was just a pawn in her big game. After all, her estate was her first child, but I was not going to let her step over my life. So I told her that I would not do as she said, and I lost my calm and shouted at her, and I quote, "Do you even care about your own flesh and blood, or is that brick and mortar building all you care about?" I left my mother's house with this. This led to a lot of strain on me and my mother's relationship, but I was satisfied with my choice as in the next 6 months I got my dream job as a finance manager. And I found Jenny, who was one of the purest souls I've ever laid my eyes upon. I met her through Robert at one of his pool parties. She's an editor at a renowned publishing house, and she understands me, and for once, she's someone who puts my needs before her own. After living with her for a few months, she feels like the perfect match for me, and due to this reason, last month I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. We're planning a wedding for next month, and Jenny is very excited about the same thing, but the only person not happy with our wedding is my mother. She does not like Jenny much, because she feels like she lacks a bit of status because she is from a middle-class family. My mother is still very adamant about Emma being the perfect fit for me, and it seemed for the last few days at least that she's been plotting something against me and Jenny. Her plan just came to fruition, as Emma is here in front of me after so many months of separation, and Emma comes and tries to hug me in front of my fiancé and says, "Oh, did you miss me, Stevie?" I'm astounded by her behavior. I step back and give her a look of disgust. She tells me in her cocky voice, "I hope I didn't miss much of the wedding festivities, but I'm here now." Emma being here cannot be good at all. I'm sure she'll try her best to create a rift between me and Jenny. What are her actual intentions for coming here? I'll never know. Did my mother invite her over to try to break me and Jenny up? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is about to be a heck of a roller coaster of drama and deceit and, well, a little bit of surprises, because I have some groundbreaking updates. I've compiled the entire story right here for you guys, and the first update takes place 5 days after Emma arrived out of the blue. If you guys are new to the channel and you want daily videos, the best way to get that is super simple. Hit that subscribe button. You can find it located underneath this video, and don't forget to hit the bell notifications as well, so you get alerts whenever a video's uploaded. Here's your first update 5 days later. It's been 5 days since Emma just appears out of the blue into our happily going lives. In the first few days, Jenna did not like her presence. I honestly don't blame her because Emma's getting on my nerves as well. She tries to act all sweet and get friendly with Jenny, and I warn Jenny not to believe anything and fall into Emma's trap. But my mother's forcing Jenny to hang out with Emma, and it seems like it's working because Jenny has started to trust them and likes hanging out with Emma. All three of them go shopping, go out to eat. It's sort of weird. And I feel like Emma's just scheming something against us because a girl like that is evil and Emma can never change. I just have to figure out a plan to expose exactly how toxic Emma is and break my mother's notion of Emma being this perfect little role model of a girl. I don't like the idea of Jenny hanging out with my mother and Emma because every time she's with them, they try to undermine her job and joke about her status. Jenny does not show that these things affect her, but it is affecting her self-confidence as she's not herself anymore, and just tries to be more like Emma. But I guess she just wants to fit in with my mother, so that she likes her a bit better. Jenny is so busy these days, balancing work and her new social life, and I can tell the writer she is working for seems to be a big deal for her and her publishing house, so there's a lot of pressure on her to deliver the perfect book. Emma hosted a party last night and she invited all of us, but I was suspicious of what she might be planning, so I also invited Robert to keep an eye on her, and the party was all right with drinks, music, games, and all of us had a good time. I found that Jenny was chit-chatting very happily with Emma, so I went to them to find Jenny talking about the famous writer that she's working for, and if she pulls the job off well, she will get a promotion. I'm very proud of her for working so hard and diligently. Emma also seemed happy about it, and we all toasted to Jenny's success. Emma seemed very interested in Jenny's work, so she asked Jenny to show her the book that she had been working on, saying, and I quote, "Jenny, I know how hard you've been working on this, babe, so I think you deserve appreciation from all of us." It was a bit suspicious, but I did not think much of it. Jenny brought her laptop to show Emma her work, and I left the girls to chit-chat as my mother called me out to this point. My mother seemed to be in a very jolly mood. "Sweetie, well, will you go get me another drink?" I went to get another dirty martini for my mother, and when I came back she was smiling while looking dotingly at Emma and Jenny. As I approached her, she said this: "I'm sorry I've been so harsh to old Jenny, but hanging out with her these days just proved to me that she can be just like us. Honey, you have my blessing. I do love Emma, but if Jenny makes you happy, then you should be with her." I was very happy to finally get my mother's support, and I could not believe my ears for once. But not wanting to jinx it, I just hugged her. The rest of the night went by in an absolute flash. Dancing, music, you name it. It is true what they say. Time flies when you're having fun. But all of it vanished, and all hell broke loose the next morning because I woke up to Jenny crying so loudly. I asked her what happened, and she showed me the news article. The book that she had been working on had been published under her name as the writer, not by the publishing house Jenny worked for, but by their rivals. Jenny had received a letter from the writer threatening to sue her for stealing his book, and another letter from the publishing house firing her instantly. Jenny was so stunned to even speak. She could not figure out how all of this happened. But the moment I recalled last night, it all made sense to me. Emma, that's why she was so interested in Jenny's work, huh? And my mother being nice to me and accepting Jenny, that was all a ruse to keep me away from them, while Emma stole Jenny's work. She wanted to defame Jenny and destroy her career because no other publishing house would hire an editor involved in theft and scandals. At that moment, all that mattered to me was to comfort Jenny and tell her that it would be okay. But in my mind, only one thing was going on. I wanted to restore my fiancé's honor, and it can only be done in one way: by destroying Emma. I'll make her pay for what she did to my Jenny, and I'll prove to my mother that she bet on the wrong horse. Update number 2. I tried to find Emma that day, but she was nowhere to be seen. So I went to my mother instead to confront her, and she just played dumb, as if she was not understanding anything. "Sweetie, I'm your mother? Why would I do something like this to your fiancé? But I've known that woman since my childhood, and nothing mattered to her more than her estate, and she could even betray her son by getting ahead in it. So I did not believe even a fragment of her sugar-coated words. I even asked her, 'Where's Emma? I know she's the mastermind behind this plan, Mom.' She answers, 'Oh, that poor girl that you left heartbroken. She's too pure to carry out something like this, honey. How can you doubt her even for a second?' I don't know how the magic wand Emma has used on my mother was working, but she's not ready to hear a single word against her. But she's my mother, and I want her by my side. I want her to be kind to my fiancé, so I want to show her the real side of Emma. I've also been trying to reach Robert because he basically disappeared unexpectedly from the party last night and has not talked to me since. I need to talk to him about the whole situation. I'm sure he must have gotten a good solution for it, but I cannot leave Jenny alone in this condition. She wasn't even speaking to anyone. Watching her like this broke my heart further, and it fueled the raging fire for revenge against Emma. I called Jenny's best friend so that she could accompany her while I went to meet Robert. It might take me some time, as Robert lives on the other side of the city, and as soon as Jenny's friend came, I left the house, promising Jenny to be back soon. I'm so glad that I went to see Robert, because he had all the answers to my problems. You see, he had the perfect solution to save Jenny's job and make Emma pay. As I told him last night to keep an eye on Emma, he observed her using Jenny's laptop a bit suspiciously, looking around, and just at the right moment he recorded a video of Emma stealing Jenny's story. It would be evidence enough to put Emma behind bars for theft and prove Jenny innocent of all the charges. Robert further told me that the reason he was not able to contact me was that he was investigating the scope of Emma's plan further. He found out that Emma had made a deal with the rival publishing firm owner to pay double the value of the book if he published it overnight with Jenny's name on it. He found evidence about this too when he contacted the rival publisher. This piece of news made me jump with joy, and this evidence was enough for the publishing firm not to fire Jenny and free her of all the accusations, and her career would not be jeopardized. But I knew it would take more than this to convince my mother of Emma's true nature, and for that, I will need to show her the side of Emma that I saw all these months ago. So, me and Robert came up with a brilliant plan just to expose Emma, not just in front of my mother, but also in front of her colleagues who admire her so much. Update number 3. It's the next day, and I'm ready to pull my plan off and destroy Emma's career, just as she tried to destroy my Jenny's career. Emma texted me last night. "Oh, heard about Jenny's job. I hope she's okay. You guys can always count on me if you need a friend." I can't believe how double-faced people can be. But I decided to let her think she was winning. So I kept going with her pretense and asked if she could meet me for coffee the next day, as I could use something to take my mind off of things. As she walked right into my trap, seeing it as an opportunity to find joy in my misery. The next day, I invited her over to the house while Jenny was away with her friend, who took her out so that she might feel better. Emma arrived right on time, and I let her in, acting all gloomy as if my life was falling apart right in front of me. But I could barely do anything to save it. She had the most sympathetic expression on her face, and I made coffee while she made herself comfortable in the living room. Then we started conversing about the whole mess lately, and she dared to talk me about a job role for Jenny and her father's company. I've been handling my dad's finances since last year, and truly, with all these new franchises, it's getting a little too much. I could use a bit of help. So, there's this position of my assistant open if Jenny's looking for a job. Her attitude towards Jenny stung me like a bee. But I kept calm, keeping in my mind, so I said to her these words. Jenny is more into writing, not finances. She gave this whole judgmental expression like beggars can't be choosers, and she said, But, after the whole stunt Jenny pulled, it's hard to get a job in writing in any field like that. And that was it. I could no longer stay calm. She did the whole thing and was talking about my fiancé like she was a criminal or something, so I started instigating her, because I knew she could not control her temper, no matter how sweet she pretended to be, so I said to her, I know you're jealous of Jenny, because you could never be as good as her. The expression on her face instantly changed from calm to angry, and she gets up from the couch and blurted back, Jealous? Ugh, that middle-class filth! She wishes that she were me. I was enraged, and she had no right to talk about Jenny like this, so I retorted back. I think you're the one wishing you were here engaged to me. Isn't that why you've done what you've done and what you've wanted? A dream wedding with me, so you could control me all your life, so you could just step over me and use me in your sick power games. And I guess this was the thing that set the plan off perfectly. As on hearing these words, Emma picked up her coffee mug and tried to slam it directly at me. But I was already careful, knowing her nature, so I ducked at the right moment, and the cup hit the wall instead. But inside, I was truly satisfied. My plan had gone off just as I planned, because Emma could never change. Had she changed, she would not have helped me unknowingly wreck her good girl image. As the cup missed me, Emma got up and left the house, enraged and cursing over the top of her voice. But I had what I needed. I just wanted the perfect moment to execute my plan. There's only one little hiccup in the plan. How am I going to get everyone together when I expose their personal favorite, Emma Mackenzie? Update number 4. The perfect opportunity presented itself on a silver platter in the next week's city newspaper. Emma's father was, getting another office building in the city, inaugurating it. And I guess who's in charge of this new building? Yes, his lovely, quote, perfect daughter. There could be no better chance to expose the real face of Emma in front of everyone whom she fools with her perfect girl image. So everything else was in place. My mother was already invited to the inauguration ceremony, and there were renowned names in the industry invited, and the cherry on top was the presence of the media and news reporters. So not only will I expose Emma in front of her colleagues, but also in front of the whole world. But the only issue was that after last week's fiasco, Emma invited neither me nor Jenny to the ceremony, and Robert solved that problem for me. He had good connections in the industry, so he was well acquainted with one of Emma's subordinates, who was handling the tech and graphics team. And through the subordinate, we got to know that the whole staff had made a montage as an acknowledgement of Emma's hard work and good nature towards her employees. We managed to sneak into the venue earlier than the other guest, and through the subordinate, I also brought Jenny with me, along with Robert. I had already told Jenny about Emma's involvement in her defamation, so even Jenny was fueled with rage for Emma. We met the subordinate backstage and gave him a video recording, which was to replace the montage that they made for Emma. Me and Robert had managed to get everything that happened at my house the last week on camera. And there was also the video of Emma stealing Jenny's story to prove that she was a thief and the world's biggest hypocrite. The subordinate was hesitant to switch the montage with our video as he was scared that he might lose his job. But Robert convinced him and offered him a deal he could not resist, along with a job in Robert's law firm, and now our plan was finally coming to fruition. The guests started to fill in, and soon the whole venue was full with about 200 people, along with Emma, her father, and my mother in the front row. Well, I was happy my mother was getting a front row seat to witness the absolute downfall of the, quote, poor little girl she wanted her son to marry. As soon as the event started, people were talking about the glory that old Emma and her father had achieved. And then the moment came and no one knew I was there, as I was backstage the whole time. So when I went on stage, I could see the shocked expression on my mother's face, but that was nothing compared to Emma's. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. So I started my speech. Hello, everyone. Some of you might not know me, but Emma is my dear friend and ex-girlfriend. We shared so many beautiful moments, and she was also there with me and my fiancé when we were passing through a very tough time. Everyone glanced at Emma admiringly, and she passed an uncomfortable smile at me, so I continued. So, I would like to thank Emma for being my greatest friend, and here's a tribute to her from me and my fiancé. Just as I stopped, the video started on the screen. First that of Emma stealing Jenny's story, and then that of Emma throwing the coffee mug at me, and everybody was stunned. Emma and her father and my mother stood up from their places, and I continued. Oh, I forgot to add that Emma has some serious temper issues for which she should definitely see a therapist. And among her various talents, she's also pretty good at stealing other people's work, and then framing them about the crime she's committed. Emma's father looked like he wanted nothing more than just to disappear into the thin air at that moment. People started to rebuke both Emma and her father, and the reporters noted that, well, the pictures, as they had hit the jackpot. Emma wanted to leave, but my mother held her hand, and she slapped Emma right across her face, saying, "And all this time I trusted you over my own son?" I had already informed the authorities of the crime committed by Emma, and she was charged with a huge fine and a volunteer work of a year probation. She was also put into a therapy program for her temper. The news was all over the next day's newspaper, and Emma's company suffered a huge loss due to it. So, I hope she learned her lesson and will try to work on herself. As for my mother, she deeply regrets the way that she treated me and Jenna. She has been trying to repair the bond with both of us, and we're willing to give her another chance. She even passed a family heirloom over to Jenny as a token of trust in her acceptance of Jenny as my partner. Jenny got to keep her job, as I had already informed her publishing house about the whole misunderstanding, and she also got to continue working for the renowned writer on another of his upcoming books. I hope this time everything goes well and Jenny gets the promotion she very much deserves. Guys, it's been a month since all this went down, and Jenny and I have gotten married last week. It was a very small ceremony with close friends only and a bit of family, but we could not have wished for anything more. The whole journey here was a total roller coaster of emotions, but I guess that's life, and I'm glad Jenny and I made it through it all.